Way and Clifford near that intersection there, the 7-Eleven intersection. So that roadway remains closed until that investigation resolves. And if you're traveling along Highway 152, that technically is part of 152, so plan on that section of your commute being shut down for right now. I'm sure Susan will have updates on that shooting. Yeah. Northbound 1 near Munros, a traffic collision reported. No injuries, thankfully. This was reported at 3:55. Vehicle partially in the center divider. Salinas Street near 183 in Monterey County. I believe that's just outside of Pajaro. A hit and run with no injuries at 3:55. Highway 152 eastbound near Dinosaur Point. A traffic collision, no injuries at 3:55. Both vehicles involved there are off to the right-hand shoulder. And let's check speeds here. All right, southbound still slow moving, southbound 17 near the 85 connector. That's what you would expect, though. As you make your way past Vasona Park, speeds pick up fairly quickly. Here in Santa Cruz, it's slow moving from Morrissey all the way into Aptos, slowest, of course, near 41st Avenue, where speeds are pretty much stop and go. Heading into Moss Landing from either direction, plan on speeds 10, 15 miles per hour, 20 miles per hour tops as you head into Moss Landing from either direction. Monterey into Seaside, stop and go through Monterey. Speeds will pick up temporarily and then slow back down as you head into Seaside, 10 miles per hour there. Southbound 101 through Coyote Valley, 10 miles per hour. Back to the limit near Morgan Hill. Stop and go traffic south of Gilroy near 10th Street. That, too, is typical for this time of day. All right, moving on to weather tonight. You can expect patchy fog after 11 p.m. along with increasing clouds. Lows should be around 55 degrees along with east-southeast winds, 5 to 7 miles per hour. Tomorrow's forecast, mostly sunny by noon. Highs will be around 70 degrees. There's a small craft advisory out on the Monterey Bay this evening. Northwest winds should be expected as well, 5 to 15 knots, gusts of up to 25 knots. Wind waves 3 to 4 feet, along with northwest swells 3 feet at 14 seconds. Patchy fog should also be expected. Headlines are coming up next. Susan Simon is standing by with those. Remember to check out KSCO.com for news, traffic, weather, podcasts, and more. Also remember, subscribe to the Santa Cruz Sentinel. 3 fantastic deals for our listeners. 831-706-3261. Headlines up next. Susan Simon, take it away.
Thanks, Dave. A 22-year-old man was transported to an area hospital after he was shot when he lunged at Watsonville police officers this morning with a kitchen knife. That after the man's family told officers he was on drugs and was hallucinating. The suspect, who also threw rocks at cars on Ohlone Parkway, was reportedly shot once in the torso. Initially, Main Street was closed between Clifford Drive and Ohlone Parkway. Watsonville police officers are now saying that Main Street closure is between Green Valley Road and Longview Drive. Although full containment is expected today for the Ferguson fire burning near Yosemite National Park, interior parts of the forest may continue to smolder and burn for some time, causing lingering smoke. Yosemite Valley reopened to visitors yesterday, as did the Wawona and Mariposa Groves. However, Glacier Point is still closed to the public. For more information, people are encouraged to go online to nps.gov/YOSE or call the national park. A San Francisco woman was arrested in Santa Cruz after she hit someone on the back of the head for no reason. Her victim flagged down a Santa Cruz police officer, and that officer arrested 46-year-old Catherine Galbraith, who was on court release from a previous arrest. Galbraith has since been booked into Santa Cruz County Jail. A housing bond will be on the ballot in Santa Cruz County this November. 3rd District Supervisor Ryan Coonerty spoke with KSCO about how that came about.
In the case of the housing bond, there was a community group made up of everybody from union folks to small business people, housing activists who had been meeting for a couple years to put together this bond to work with all the cities and the county and figure out what's the amount. And they did polling, and really they created a package and then brought it to us and asked us to put it on the ballot to let the voters decide in November. And it was a thoughtful measure, and it had support from really across the spectrum.
If approved by voters, the $140 million affordable housing bond would fund the development of more than 1,000 new affordable housing units in Santa Cruz County, as well as providing loans for first-time homebuyers and homeless service programs. The Neptune pool at Hearst Castle is expected to reopen for public tours in the next few weeks. The iconic tourist attraction was closed down and drained back in 2014, so a $5.4 million restoration project could take place. All of the old tiles were removed and the cracks in the concrete shell of the pool were filled with expandable polyurethane foam. The concrete shell was then sanded and resurfaced and a waterproof liner was added before 15,000 replica tiles from the original source were installed to complete that restoration. The time now 11 minutes after 4 p.m. More local news for you coming up at the bottom of the hour. For KSCO, I'm Susan Simon.
Hi, this is Chef Jamie Smith of Foodsmith. We've been in business for over 3 years now. I started Foodsmith for people just like you so that I could bring to your table healthy, fresh, delicious, organic foods ready to eat every day. Our meals are incredibly affordable, especially when you consider that you have to do no shopping, no cooking, and no cleaning. Our meals average just over $8 a piece delivered. Just go to our website at www.myfoodsmith.com to place your order and enter the code KSCO20 for 20% off your first order.
Kubota comfort will surprise you. Kubota versatility and performance is amazing. See everything Kubota has to offer, including the new BX80 Subcompact Series at C&N Tractors in Watsonville. Performance, versatility, comfort, and exceptional financing available on approved credit. C&N Tractors makes it so easy to get a Kubota. Get details at cndntractors.com or at C&N Tractors in Watsonville. Give us your tough jobs.
Hi, I'm Sam Quinn for Coast Paper and Supply. Founded over 60 years ago, Coast Paper and Supply continues to be the one-stop local supply source for businesses, large and small, school districts, special events, and for your home. Their 1,800 square foot showroom is huge, and it's packed with everything from paper and janitorial supplies to whatever you need for shipping and packing, no matter if you're moving your business or your home across town. They've even got motel-hotel amenities, disposable food service items, and even eco-friendly cleaning supplies. Discover for yourself why many local businesses, schools, and people go to Coast Paper and Supply for selection, low prices, and great customer service. You can find Coast Paper and Supply at 151 Josephine Street, open 8 to 4:30 weekdays. You can shop online at coastpapersupplyinc.com or give them a call at 831-423-3350.
From Pasatiempo to Pebble Beach, Red Hot News Talk, AM 1080 KSCO Santa Cruz.
Listening to AM 1080 KSCO Santa Cruz. It is Wednesday, August 15th, and born on this day was Leon Theremin, 1896. Holy cow, that guy's old if he's still alive, which he probably isn't. He is the inventor of the theremin. That's the instrument you just heard playing there. Welcome aboard Flight 1080. I'm Dave Michaels. I want to thank our guests yesterday. Kenny Thomas brought in a whole bunch of guests, and I want to thank them for coming in and hanging out and with us and sharing some time. Today's guest is showing up at 5 p.m., and he is here, and we're going to talk some really cool stuff coming up. So that gives me 1 hour on my own, which usually makes me kind of nervous, but I have you guys to keep me company, and I have a whole bunch of topics that I will seemingly never get to unless I do something like this, and that's take an hour to just talk about cool stuff that I find very cool, and I want to share with you. I have a little bit of sunstroke because, not sunstroke, but I am hot. It's hot out there. It's hot out there. I went outside. I just got back from Santa Cruz Memorial Cemetery, which might sound weird, and it is kind of weird now that I said it out loud. You know, until you say something out loud, a lot of ideas don't sound as crazy. But anyways, I went out there to check out Father Riker Father William Riker, who's, by the way, coincidentally, inspiration for the name of the second in command on board the USS Enterprise, second in command to Jean-Luc Picard. That character's name is John Riker, or William Riker. And he was named after the cult leader up on Highway 17, Father William E. Riker. So I did a bunch of studying on him, and I thought that would be kind of cool. I found out that they, along with 2 or 3 of their disciples, are buried out there at that cemetery, which is right off the freeway.
And it's a really cool cemetery.
It is a cool cemetery, Susan. You know,
the only one that I think is cooler is the one over in Harvey West Park.
That one is awesome.
That's in this area.
Yes.
The one down in Moss Landing, also very cool.
Really? Yeah, my father's buried out there at that one. I think the coolest one is Pioneer Cemetery in Watsonville. That is a cool
I haven't been
cemetery.
there yet.
Oh, that is a fantastic one. So this one over here, I'm driving around. I'm looking for Riker, right? Because that was her name, Mother Lucille Riker, and Father William Riker.
William E.
Riker. Yes, they were not good characters. So I mean, I didn't go over there to check them out and pay respects to them because I'm not sure they're worthy of that. I just wanted to go out there and check them out as a fan of local history. I did find her grave marker. He was supposedly buried next to her, like I said, along with 2 or 3 other disciples. I found one of the other disciples buried right next to her in that cemetery. If you want to check it out, it's right off.
Find William E. Riker?
No, that's the thing. I couldn't find his grave out there, and I was hot, not feeling good.
Gravestone, maybe?
I don't know. And maybe they did.
Have a marker anymore?
Maybe they did because he was a white supremacist. I mean, and by white supremacist, I mean he preached that white people were superior, and this and that. White people and Jews. I don't know what the thing was. Really
white
weird.
People and Jews were superior?
Yeah, Christians.
Most white supremacists don't go that
I know.
route.
That's part of what made him so weird. And another thing that he said is the Church of the Perfect Christian Divine Way, Holy City, is directly opposite of Jerusalem. So if you were
Did they live up in Holy City? Is that why it's Holy City?
I don't know. I don't know if that's why it's called that. But he said in his pamphlets that if you were to drill a hole right through Holy City, right to the other side of the planet, that you would find Jerusalem. So you know what I did? I went walking all the way out there. No, I didn't. I searched it on the internet.
I was going to say, do a Google.
And do you know where you would end up if you were opposite? If you just shot.
It's not Jerusalem.
It's not nowhere near Jerusalem. We've always heard that it's China, right? That's what I saw on the Bugs Bunny cartoons.
The East Coast, but yeah.
Right. Okay. So if you drill a hole directly through the planet from Holy City right to the other side, you will end up in the middle of the Indian Ocean. You will end up southeast of Madagascar and south of the tip of Africa, the southwest, the southern tip of Africa. So you'll be out there in the middle of nowhere.
Oh, but that's...
If you were to do that.
When you get to the land masses, it's really beautiful.
If you were to do that.
I don't know about out on the water. It's kind of wet out there.
47910, and I also found out what the deepest hole ever dug happens to be.
The deepest hole ever dug? Did it collapse?
No, it didn't.
Is it the mile deep hole at Parkfield?
Oh, this is deeper than a mile. This is way deeper than a mile.
Because they have, about the one down in Parkfield.
Yeah, there were some earthquakes in Parkfield today too, right? Or yesterday?
It's a major earthquake center.
Yeah, I know. So it's no big deal. But I think there was
2.6s are nothing down there.
You know what? I don't think I have. Oh, here it is. And I'll have to research this because I did not read this. This is the one story I did not read. The deepest hole that has ever been dug. I know they're working on one out from the middle of the ocean, which is supposedly going to surpass this. It took 17 years to build the one that holds the current record, or to drill. 17 years worth of drilling. And we'll read some of that, too. So, Father Riker was up in Holy City. He is now buried at that cemetery. That is, I think it's called Oakwood.
But you didn't find it.
I didn't find it. I found her. And if you want to check it, I probably shouldn't say this because then you're going to get a whole bunch of people showing up.
No, don't do that.
Yeah.
They'll take away her marker, too.
Yeah.
That would be bad.
Oh, that would be. I didn't even think about that if they did that.
Holy City is an unincorporated community in Santa Clara County. It's actually in the Lexington Hills. Once considered a utopian community in the 1920s and 30s. Is that when he was there?
What?
1920s and 30s. Is that when they were there?
That's when they were there, yes. He passed away.
It was considered a utopian community, the Holy City.
Yeah, there was up to 250 people up there. It was a commune. Everybody, it was mostly men, older men. They had to give up their worldly possessions to him, that's Father Riker, and he built a whole bunch of little cabins up there, which the disciples lived in. He and his wife, Mother Lucille, lived in a house at the top of this commune so that they could keep an eye on everybody that was down there.
I have to tell you that this was a group of people that was designed not to last very long.
What do you mean?
They preached celibacy.
Well, yeah.
It's harder to get disciples if you don't grow them.
That's how he converted to a Catholic, which is how he got buried out there. He had been celibate for 10 years. He had seen the light, decided that he wanted to be converted to a Catholic before he passed away. He is buried there, not as a Christian, but as a Catholic. Not as a Jew, but as a Catholic. They're very, very weird teachings. And I've got a whole bunch of stuff here.
Did he start out as a Jew?
I really don't know how he started out that young, but I do have some stories here about him, which I'm going to share with everybody. It's really fun and it's interesting if nothing else. It's interesting if nothing else. Over at that cemetery, while I was looking for Father and Mother Riker, I found some other names like Wilder, Porter, Jarvis.
Yeah, all the ones that
F.A. Hinn. Or is it F.A. Hinn or F.A. Hinn?
Hinn,
right?
I think.
Yeah. The guy who was responsible for building the a bunch of the railroad and also for building the boardwalk, right? It's something to do with the boardwalk and that whole vacation development.
Did you know there was a radio station up in Holy City?
Yes, KFQU.
Yeah.
And if you say it out loud, it's yeah.
Not doing it.
That's why that's part of the reason why they shut it down. I also saw Kron. That's KRON.
It was operating.
I did not see KGO. No.
It was operating on a radio wave far from its assigned frequency.
Yeah, and they were talking a whole bunch of stuff which the FCC decided was not serving the interest of the community. So they pulled the license and then he burnt it down, and basically said, "Hey, FQU to the FCC."
When Highway 17 was built, the city was no longer on the main route.
Yeah, that's pretty much what killed it. Also what killed it was he met this Hollywood director, which he tried to woo, because at that time Hollywood had just finished filming and I say Hollywood because I don't, just kind of a generic term, had finished filming a movie up there. That's where Redwood Estates came from, by the way. It was built as a resort for Hollywood stars and whoever had the money for that. So they had just finished filming a movie up there.
There were other interesting places up there too.
Yeah. And he decided that he was going to try to appeal to movie producers. That never panned out. In that effort, he signed over half of Holy City to a Hollywood movie producer. Later ended up selling the other half to him. That guy, from there it all went downhill. Everybody got sued and it all just kind of broke up. But that's how Holy City eventually fell apart. That was the end of Holy City. He gave half of it away, sold the other half to the same guy. That guy, gave him the shaft, and there you go. That was the end of it. His wife had a stroke, ended up dying. He died 19 years later up at Agnews and was buried here.
Where is Agnews?
Agnews State Hospital. I don't know where that is.
Okay.
Isn't that where they
Agnews
keep crazy people?
Well, if it's a state hospital, then yes.
Yeah, that's every time I think of that name, I always think that. Hawaiian Punch was invented up on Holy City. Did you know that?
Oh, yeah? No.
Yeah, Hawaiian Punch was invented on Holy City, as well as two beers. Let's see. The Soda Works was quite successful, especially during Prohibition. According to one source, Hawaiian Punch was developed in Holy City, and the recipe later sold. Ginger Ale and Golden Glow beer were also produced with Fruit Bowl and 3-in-1. Those were other drinks developed up there on Holy City.
3-in-1 is lubricant.
Wow, it is, huh? I was thinking a drink, but you're right.
Drink it.
It is a lubricant.
Don't drink it. That's bad.
And it says lubricant for hinges, not for other places. It's a lubricant for let's say, like you keep in your garage.
Or you put it in your sewing machine, too.
Or your sewing machine.
Did you know that the Holy City Zoo, a former comedy club in San Francisco, had the sign, table, and chairs that all came from the original site of the zoo
at
Holy City?
Really? No, I didn't know that. I did not know that. That's cool. Let's see here. I have some other highlighted stuff.
Somebody bought Holy City.
Yeah, recently.
2 years ago for $6 million.
Yeah, and that's another thing I want to talk about, too. Those were Silicon Valley.
It has its own zip code.
Entrepreneurs. Had its own post office, too.
Yeah, and it had 100 and some odd acres.
As a matter of fact, if
142
you go
acres.
driving down Old Santa Cruz Highway, the building that you see remaining there is the last post office, was turned into a glass blowing shop and is now sitting vacated and is empty. But you can still see that building. If you look off to the left, if you're driving north, if you look off to the left, you can see an old garage, which I think was part of the services that they offered.
Have you
there.
ever been over to see the town of Lexington when the reservoir is really low?
I have. And you know what, Susan? If you want to go out there right now, you can see it right now.
It's that low?
It's that low. And the road you want to drive is something Reservoir, Alma Reservoir, Alma Reservoir Road, I think is what it is.
Alma Road.
Oh, it's Alma Reservoir Road, because Alma Road leads to Alma Reservoir Road.
Okay.
So Alma Reservoir Road is the one you want to take. If you take that along the roadway,
The north end of
and you drive real slow
reservoir.
because nobody's out there. Drive real slow and peek through the bushes, the high and low points in the bushes. You can see, you can see that. It's
So
really
you can
cool.
see some of the buildings still?
You can see some of the. You can see
what's
the
left of
bridge.
them?
You can see the bridges. Perfect. I mean, they look like they were just built yesterday. They were. I don't know if they're preserved from the water or what. Maybe sitting underwater, the air doesn't oxidize them or something.
It was
I don't
hard
know.
for me to imagine that they just flooded a town.
It is really, really cool, though. Really, really cool. Highway 17, Holy City is what So I went out there to a memorial cemetery and asked one of the grave diggers, or grave robber, I don't know, what do you call them, the tenants?
Yeah.
I asked him, hey, where is Father Riker? He goes,
Wait, you asked one of the tenants at the cemetery?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know how else
The
to
tenants
ask.
at the cemetery are
Well,
the ones that are under the ground. They pay rent. They're tenants.
I didn't think of that. I meant, one of the people that maintain
Okay,
maintenance
one of the
crews.
live ones.
One of the live ones, yeah.
The actual live walking
Could that be
around.
used interchangeably? I don't know, but I was asking a live guy, where is, this part of the cemetery? I'm looking for Father Riker. I asked him, had you ever heard of Father Riker? And he was obviously a millennial. I mean, 20s, early 20s. He had never heard of Father Riker, so I told him a little bit about it. He was like, meh. I don't know what's up with that. I think it's interesting. I think it's fascinating.
Well,
some
you
people,
did
some
have
people
a
are just
co-host
nerds.
at one
What
point
do you
in
want to
time
do?
that had no belief that anything prior to right now was of any value at all.
Yeah, well, what are you going to do?
And that was a co-host you had for a while.
Here's a story about Father Riker. William Balch, or is it Balch, a former Los Gatos
Well,
banker.
that's not William E. then.
No, this is a different one. He was a banker. He's telling a story of Father Riker driving up to the bank in his red, white, and blue painted Cadillac, accompanied by his dog, a fox terrier, who would wait in the car while his master was doing his banking. Riker brought in all the cash and had yellow checks made up with a picture of Jesus on one corner. He would sit and talk, boring anyone within earshot with his ramblings and divine thoughts. When his dog got tired of waiting in the car, he would put his paw on the horn and blast away until Riker came out of the bank.
Pretty cool dog.
That's pretty cool, right? So, I mean, the whole Santa
Wonder
Cruz
how
Hills,
long that took before the dog said, okay, dude, let's get out of here.
Santa Cruz mountains are full of interesting stories like this and interesting characters.
Have you looked at the old pictures of Holy City?
I have, yeah. I have a book here. Actually, I got most of this stuff from a book called Holy City, Riker's Roadside Attraction in the Santa Cruz Mountains. This was written by Betty Lewis, who I think is no longer alive. But this is a great book. When Logos was here, I bought it for $5.40. Is there any
Nice.
bookshops like that around here? Where you could go in there and just look
I
at
don't
weird
know if
books
it's
and buy them
still
for...
there, but there used to be a cool bookstore in Watsonville.
It's not the Kellys?
No, it was in the shopping center, and I think it went away to become part of Kaiser or something.
Yeah, I think that was Kelly's.
Okay, maybe so then. It was near the cool little fabric store.
I saw a bookshop in Monterey on the corner right there on
There are a couple still
Lighthouse.
down there.
Is there?
Yeah,
Has
I think
have
there's
you ever
one
gone
off
into
Alvarado.
there to see if there's anything worth? See, this is the
No.
stuff I like. I like Bigfoot books, but I'm not going to pay $40 for a book like that. You kidding
Well,
me?
you could go
I
up
want,
to the Bigfoot Museum.
That's an idea. That's an idea.
You've never been up there, huh?
I have been up there with Mike Rugg. Yeah, that guy tells some interesting stories. And yeah, you can decide on your own, and he will let you decide on your own, but you should check it out if you haven't.
Sounds
479-1080. Let's take a call before. Do we have enough time to take a call, Susan? Before we
Yes.
go to
Oh, yeah, you
news?
definitely have enough time to go
Okay,
take
all right.
a call.
Let's take a call
I
and
didn't
see
even realize what time it was.
where you're calling from, your name and where you're calling from, sir or ma'am.
Oh, I'm Dave from Salinas.
Hey, Dave, what do you got?
Holy City, I thought now is bought by the Church of Scientology.
Yeah, you know what? I think you're right. I had forgotten about that, but it was purchased by two members of the Church of Scientology who also happen to be Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, I guess you would call them.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I kind of grew up in the church as a little kid, but never really did anything with it. But, you know, they have some interesting stuff, but they do buy a lot of land, and we'll see what happens with it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you for the call, Dave. I had forgotten all about that. Yeah, Silicon Valley, the money's moving in here. It is moving in here. Bought Holy City. I had forgotten about that. But they also bought, they being Silicon Valley investors or entrepreneurs, residents, also bought the House of Mysteries. Is that what it's called? The Castle of Mysteries out on Fairmont Street with all the weird building with all the anti-submarine gear. And it's a really weird place. That place was also purchased by people from out of the area. Maybe that's why I think local history is so cool. I'm trying to preserve what's here, if for nobody else than for myself in my head, because it's being purchased, it's being bought by people who can't possibly care about it as much as we do. Maybe that's why I find it so cool. I don't know why I find going to cemeteries cool. That's weird. It's not weird? Okay, good. 479-1080, DM at KSCO.com. What's on the opposite side of Santa Cruz County on the globe? And that, again, you would be south of Madagascar in the Indian Ocean in the middle of nowhere. You do not want to be there. I will tell you on the other side what the deepest hole ever dug was. It's still being built, still being dug, 17 years in the making. KSCO Santa Cruz, it's 432. Headlines coming up next. KSCO News Time is 4:32. Headlines up next. Here's Susan Simon.
Thanks, Dave. Several brush fires slowed down traffic during the afternoon commute on Highway 101 in Salinas yesterday. The fire in the center divider near Laurel Drive was put out by 6 p.m., but then another small one ignited near the Spence Road exit. Several drivers stopped to stomp that one out. High levels of bacteria have been found at 3 Monterey County beaches. Asilomar, Monterey Municipal, and Carmel beaches have been posted with advisory signs. Those signs will remain posted until the water off those beaches is safe for human contact once again. A 30-year-old probationer was arrested after he was found trespassing on an elementary school campus in Santa Cruz. Michael Norman, who was reportedly camped out at Green Acres Elementary School, was found in possession of a stolen computer and a BB gun. Norman was arrested on suspicion of possessing stolen property and possessing a weapon on school grounds. A DUI driver's license checkpoint is slated to be in place within Watsonville's city limits tomorrow. It will start at 6 p.m. and end at 3 a.m. Saturday morning. Watsonville police officers are specifically looking for drivers under the influence of marijuana or prescription drugs. A national enforcement campaign also begins tomorrow, or on Friday rather. It's called Drive Sober or Get Pulled Over and runs through September 3rd. The time now, 34 minutes after 4 p.m. More local news for you coming up at the top of the hour. For KSCO, I'm Susan Simon.
Thank you, Susan. KSCO drive time is now 4:34. Let's take a quick look at traffic and weather. We'll start off with traffic out on Railroad Avenue, Santa Cruz County. A traffic hazard reported at 425. Someone blocking someone's driveway. Big deal. Southbound 17 near Granite Creek. Traffic hazard reported there at 420. Looks like we have sheeting in the roadway. Sheetrock, sheet metal, I don't know, something out there in the roadway. Southbound 17 near Granite Creek, so be on the lookout there. Northbound 1 near Munros, a traffic collision reported at 355. This is in Monterey County. Looks like they have moved both vehicles off to Aguajito Road. Moving on to your freeway speeds around the area. Highway 17 is slow moving in the southbound direction near the 85 connector, of course. And as usual, it's back to the limit near Vasona Park. Highway 1 here in Santa Cruz, slow moving from Soquel Avenue, or maybe Morrissey, down into Aptos, slowest at 41st Avenue, where it is definitely stop and go. Carmel into Seaside, that whole stretch of Highway 1 northbound, 10 miles per hour for the most part. Moss Landing as well, both directions, either side, doesn't matter. 10 miles per hour will be your top speed heading into and through Moss Landing. 101 southbound through Coyote Valley into Morgan Hill, 10 miles per hour, that is 10. And then again at 10th Street in Gilroy. Your weather forecast for tonight, patchy fog is expected. Lows should be around 55 degrees. Tomorrow, sunny. Highs will be around 70 degrees. Keep it tuned in to KSCO Santa Cruz. We will be right back.
Satisfy your hunger with a fresh, prepared, twice-daily grab-and-go sushi you'll find waiting for you at Sushi Market Sprouts, 2 blocks from the beach at 300 7th Avenue in Santa Cruz. Fresh, delicious, and oh so good.
Hello, I'm Junko, and I look forward to serving you at the Sushi Market Sprouts.
Are you struggling with stubborn, unwanted fat? Are your clothes not fitting the way they used to? Hi, this is Stacy Bosco, owner of Body Lab Med Spa, and if this sounds like you, then you need to check out the world's leading non-invasive fat removal treatment. It's called Cool Sculpting. Cool Sculpting is an FDA-cleared medical procedure that freezes away unwanted fat for good, without surgery or downtime. Cool Sculpting can be done during your lunch hour. And during your free consultation, our certified Cool Sculpting specialist will assess your needs and tailor your treatment to achieve your desired results. With Cool Sculpting, it's never been easier to transform your body. Call us today at 831-600-8911 to schedule your free consultation. You owe it to yourself to take the next step. Go to bodylabspa.com to schedule your free consultation.
It's always open house at the Mike Young Real Estate Hour, and you are always invited to walk right in and join the discussion. Hello, I am Mike Young, and I love talking real estate with all the experts and with you. So get a jump on the Real Estate Weekend every Friday, 7 p.m. on the Mike Young Real Estate Hour, right here on Listen and Be Heard Radio KSCO. The Mike Young Real Estate Hour is brought to you by Thunderbird Real Estate, Real People Selling Real Estate, by Rick Williams at American Pacific Mortgage, and by Steve Manville at Farmers Insurance. Friday at 7. See you then.
Question: would you seat your 3-year-old child on a windowsill? And would you seat them in a car seat that's not the correct one? Secure their future. Seat them in the correct car seat. More info at safercar.gov/the right seat. A message from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
This portion of Flight 1080 brought to you by the Santa Cruz Sentinel. Read the Sentinel daily in print or online and hear the stories discussed here on Flight 1080 and be part of the discussion.
You're listening to
Four 479-1080. You're listening to Flight 1080 KSCO Santa Cruz. All right, how deep was the deepest hole ever dug? Was it dug by your dog? Was it dug by a gopher, a mole maybe? Let's see, a cat? The Cola Super Deep Borehole was just 9 inches in diameter, but at 40,000, holy cow, 40,230 feet reigns as the deepest hole ever. Took more than 20 years to reach that 7.5-mile depth. Only half the distance or less through the mantle. The new record is trying to be set by some guys drilling in the middle of the ocean. There you go. All right. 475-1080 with your traffic tips. 479-1080 to get on the air. Tracy is calling from a cell phone. You're in the air.
Hey, I got an interesting person to look up.
Okay.
His name was Mount Charlie. Late 1800s. Was mauled by a bear in the Santa Cruz Mountains. He was mauled so bad they had to put a silver dollar in his head. He also did a wagon train that ran supplies over Highway 17 before that was built. So that's an interesting person for you to look up for history. Mountain Charlie.
Mountain Charlie. All right. Thank you for the call, Tracy. 4719. Not to be confused with Charlie Parkhurst, who, again, I'm going back to the first segment talking about, oh, man, I could just talk about this stuff for hours and never get to the stuff I wanted to talk to. Over in Watsonville, Pioneer Cemetery, Charlie Parkhurst is buried there, and she was known as a he until he died and was discovered to be a she. So a friend went in there to change him and saw that, holy cow, it didn't have the stuff down there. Charlie Parkhurst, check this out. Charlie Parkhurst was unofficially the first woman to vote in California. And also, if you want to check out another cool piece of history, the place that she did it is in SoCal, right off of SoCal Avenue. I think you could drive by there and see it. Yeah, I believe if you're driving through on SoCal Avenue, where the fire station is, it's somewhere near the fire station, or maybe the actual building right there, is where Charlie Parkhurst cast the first vote. She did it as a man, but was actually a woman. And she is buried in Watsonville. I don't know why she's buried out there, but she is buried out there in Watsonville. And again, the piece of history that I always love to tell is along Freedom Boulevard at Corralitos Road. Right there, that little house there used to be a brothel that would service the loggers heading up to the Corralitos Mountains.
I believe that Charlie Parkhurst lived out off of Freedom Boulevard.
Okay, then
I think that's why she's buried
in Watsonville.
All
right.
Because that would be the closest local cemetery.
You know, I want to take some time to recognize some changes that are happening in Watsonville, too.
There's a lot of them. A ton
I have
of
a caller
changes.
there. You know, I gave you some sound of that bike, the pump track they have out there, right?
Yeah.
So this is a bike track.
Pinto Lake Pump Track.
I thought you had to pedal it and get all sweaty and stuff. No, you just use your body weight to go along these turns and nice gentle slopes. Some of them, you know, more jumpy than others. But we got that going on there at Pinto Lake County Park. If you haven't been there, it's a fantastic place to go. Those of you
That's a beautiful park.
in Santa Cruz. Chris Spencer goes down there a lot to fish because there's great fishing out there. You don't want to eat them. You don't even want to touch them, except to get them off the hook. But there's great fishing out there.
Back.
Yes, a fantastic world-class disc golf course. Tons of people go out there for that. Now we're going to have a pump track, and it's about time because Watsonville needs something positive and something healthier to do. We also got not Whole Foods, New Leaf or something like that, Green Leaf Market, something like that, going out to out there on East Lake. So yeah, I'm glad that Watsonville is finally getting some healthier options. It's I give a shout out to whoever is making that happen. I guess that would be Greg Caput, Zach Friend, Lowell Hurst, and whoever is out there making things happen. Things are going good, man. I like it. I like you guys are doing well. Let's see who's out there on line one. Can I get your name and where you're calling from?
I'm sorry, it's Dave again, but you know what the deepest hole is? Mel's Hole.
Oh, yes, man. I know about Mel's Hole. I brought that up a few days ago.
Do you know that the Navy took over and they ran out so much cable that they couldn't hold up all the weight of the cable that was going down that hole, and it's miles and miles and miles deep.
Yeah, I know that. I'm familiar with the story from Art Bell's show, Mel's Hole, and I think I played some audio of that the other day of what they heard when they stuck some recording equipment down there. Really, really bizarre stuff.
It apparently has no bottom, and all the locals would take their trash and just figured it was an endless hole, and they just kept dumping stuff and dumping stuff and dumping stuff, and it never reached the bottom. I mean, it's an incredible hole that is pretty good size all the way down for miles and miles and miles.
Wow. I'll do some more research. I mean, it wasn't really something that I wanted to talk about, but these are just interesting things that I found as I was doing some prep work today. But thank you for your call, Dave. I appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks.
Sure, no problem. 479-1080. Don't thank me. Thank you. You're the one calling in. You make my job easier when you do that. 479-1080, DM at KSEO.com. We're talking Holy City, and I got a whole bunch of other topics later on coming up. We got some really, really cool stuff you're going to want to hang out and check out. That's in the 5 o'clock hour, just about 15 minutes or so from now. All right, let's head out to the phones and see who's up next. Caller, can we get your name and where you're calling from? That would be you. Are you there?
Calling from Watsonville.
Yes, sir. What do you got?
You know, I love living downtown. I've purchased a home about 10 years ago in the historic downtown, but the city officials really need to get a better handle on their own noise ordinance. It's interesting. Wow. Almost every morning about 5 a.m., 4:30 a.m., a street sweeper comes by, waking up the whole historic downtown. Then they got the garbage trucks.
Wait a minute. Where do you? I live out there on Beach Street, and man, you are talking you ripped the words right out of my mouth. That's another topic I was going to talk about today.
I'm on Westlake Avenue. It's a great area.
Uh-huh.
It can be decent, but there's an 8 a.m. noise ordinance, and the city of Watsonville pays no attention to it. I think the people are getting a little bit fleeced on this street sweeper. Frankly, they're sweeping up air every morning, and I really like that to change. I think it'd be a nicer place to live in a more Gentile community without so many trash trucks and street sweepers and, you know, other noise nuisances caused by the city, frankly.
You know what, Matt? Okay, that's fair enough. But, you know, the Watsonville does have a pretty clean downtown area. I mean, it is really kept pretty clean.
It's fairly clean. Where I live on Westlake Avenue, it's an access to the Depot bus station. You think they would keep that pretty tidy because guests, visitors, foreigners are coming to the Greyhound to and fro. They do not police the streets. The Restaurant Hotel keeps it kind of scuzzy downtown. It would be wonderful to see the city focus on the historic downtown and take pride in it like they should, like they do in Salinas,
you're right
like
about
they
that.
do in the city of Santa Cruz.
You're right about that, sir. You are absolutely right about that. And you know, take some pride. Now, listen, it's a big job to run that city. It's Watsonville's got its own problems, just like everybody else. But the buildings you're talking about are absolutely worthy of being respected, and that is the Reservoir and the Appleton Grill, or the not the Grill, but the Wall Street Inn. It used to be called maybe now the Appleton Inn. I don't know what it is, but that building right there is a beautiful building. And man, I don't think the people are taking care of it the way. And by the people, I mean the tenants. The Reservoir too. In its glory day, was a beautiful, beautiful hotel. Attracted people from all over to stay at the Reservoir.
That's right. The Reservoir was one of the first luxury hotels in Santa Cruz County. It was made of concrete and deemed as fireproof.
Yeah.
The hotel is now used for government-subsidized housing, and that's okay.
Right.
But there's property owners like Hanson, who's just built a 50-apartment building, and it's opened up now. That's happening. But I just think there just needs to be, the city officials need to hit the ground, walk around the downtown, and get down to the minutia, right down to the dumpsters and trash and people that need help. You know, maybe there needs to be some of the residents of the Reservoir put to work cleaning up the streets like they do in the Bay Area. It'd be better for everybody.
I'm with you there. Thank you for your call.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it.
Thank you for the call. 479-1080. All right, let's hit the phone lines again. Line 2. Let's see. Let me get your name and where you're calling from, ma'am.
I'm calling, asking about the shooting in Watsonville.
Yes, ma'am. I will tell you what I know. What I know is what I've heard. I was sent some pictures by our friend Billy Army earlier. That road closure has now been, thank you for calling, too. The road has been opened. Main Street, right there where it happened, is now open. That was Main Street, Ohlone Parkway, that area has now been opened. So what happened this morning around 10:30 was a confrontation with somebody who had a knife. That person kept walking towards police, apparently lunged at them. When he got about 10 feet away, or when he was about 10 feet away, definitely within arm's distance and stabbing distance, the police shot him. My understanding is that he's been identified as a 22-year-old Watsonville man who's recovering in the hospital. The officer was not hurt. The roadway is now open.
And the man did not die?
As far as I know, he did not die. He's in the hospital recovering.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Sure, you got it, ma'am. Thank you for your call.
Bye-bye.
479-1080-218-5726. Every once in a while, this job is great, and this is fantastic. So our last caller was talking about noisiness, noisy. This I found. I posted the story on our Facebook page. A Monterey bar called the Bull and Bear has had a what do you call that? Not a noisometer, a decibel. Jeez, I should have read this. Oh, by the way, thank you to whoever called in and said that the opposite side of the earth, wherever you are, in regards to wherever you are, is called the antipode. The antipode. You knew that too, Susan? Oh, okay. DM at KSCO.com, 218-5726. That's how you could text. That's 218-KSCO. Why was the Star Trek character named after the Holy City guy? You know, I really do not know, other than his name sounds cool, because Father William E. Riker, I don't want to get into the ugly side of him, but had some really ugly things to say, really, really ugly, and I don't want to get into that, but I don't know why they've named him after that. What is that thing called that measures sound, Rich? Deciometer? What is that called? The measures sound? Measures noise? A decibel meter, I guess you could call this, has been installed on the back of this bar. The ordinance says that they are not allowed to go over 65 decibels, which is barely above shouting distance, above shouting levels. So 65 decibels, I think, is ridiculous. I think, though, that if you're going to do that to restaurant owners, you should do that to those loud-ass motorcycles.
Well, but no, because the bar is right there in a residential area. I'm not sure why the bar is apparently in a residential area, but that's apparently the case.
Let's see. This is in Monterey. They have musicians and stuff, but, neighbors don't want to hear that crap. They don't want to hear this. Somebody here at the Planning Commission says, hey, you can't dump your trash on your neighbor. You can't burden your neighbor with your parking needs, and you need to manage your sound level so it doesn't impact your neighbor. 65 decibels does just that, says somebody who set this limit here. So I am wondering what is up with those guys with the loud-ass motorcycles. I hate those things. I hate them. So they say, well, it helps people to know that you're there, right? As they're driving behind or they're splitting lanes, they can hear you. I don't hear them when I'm on the freeway. I do not hear them. A guy with a loud motorcycle is right behind me. I can't hear him. So if that's the case, why don't they find something to direct the sound of the motor forward? Why is it loud to everybody else that doesn't need to hear it? The person that needs to hear it is the person in front of you or the deer or whatever it is that you want to avoid hitting. That's the person who needs to hear you. The guy who hears it loudest on the freeway is the guy on the side of him who already knows he's there. 479-1080, 218-5726 with your text messages. Woman arrested for attack in downtown Santa Cruz. This woman went crazy and punched somebody in the back of the head for no reason. Now, she's had previous offenses for this. She now sits in Santa Cruz County Jail. Here's a story from KION. A woman is behind bars after Santa Cruz police say she attacked someone for no reason. Officers say 46-year-old Catherine Galbraith of San Francisco, so she's from out of town, struck the victim in back of the head and ran away. The victim flagged down an officer who promptly responded and detained Galbraith. Based on previous citable battery incident involving the suspect, Santa Cruz Police Department sought a judge to approve a bail increase. They then found out that she had been on court release for a previous arrest and was out on her own recognizance. That's where they let you out without bail because they say, I trust you'll come back. Based on the SCPD request to the judge, the court revoked the OR status and Catherine Galbraith was booked into jail. 479-1080. The Poop Patrol is now out in San Francisco. There are 6 workers, 2 trucks, and millions of dollars put forward to try to clean up the streets of San Francisco of poop, I guess. I don't know. Not just of pets, though, also of people. Next month, 2 city crews will begin patrolling and cleaning parts of San Francisco that generate the most complaints about human and pet waste on the sidewalks. The Department of Public Works says it's going to concentrate on the area between Van Ness Avenue and the Bay, with particular attention to Polk Street and the Tenderloin area. So again, doing research, you pull up these stories, then you have to say, if you don't ask yourself, why is a tenderloin named the Tenderloin, then you're not doing your job. So why is a tenderloin named the Tenderloin? Well, it is named after a similar district in New York. That's one that appears to be the case. That district in New York is named for its triangular shape, which happens to be also the shape of a tenderloin, I guess. That's one story. Another story is that it was known as the underbelly of crime. Also, I guess, where the cut of tenderloin comes from, the underbelly. Another theory is that it was named the tenderloin by, and this is the New York origin. San Francisco was named after that place in New York. Other tales and other reasons, other theories behind the naming of the Tenderloin District is that it was named by crooked and corrupt cops who, before they had that beat, were these criminals who had money, before they had that beat, they were living hand to mouth. They were not making much money at all. They were surviving on crumbs. They were not well paid. Once they started working with the criminals and taking bribes and all that kind of stuff, now they could afford to eat tenderloin rather than hamburger meat or rat meat or whatever it is. Those are the reasons why that area in New York was named the Tenderloin. The San Francisco district was named in regards or in homage in connection to that area. San Francisco already spends millions of dollars cleaning up the streets, but Public Works is still flooded with complaints. About 65 complaints they get per day of the dirty streets. London Mayor Breed is dedicating $1 million to what is being dubbed the Poop Patrol. 5 employees and a supervisor whose job will be to get ahead of the complaints by scouting out problem areas, installing pit stop toilets, and cleaning up waste. Again, the crews will be made up of 2 trucks and 6 employees. San Francisco Mayor London Breed, in her first one-on-one interview since taking office, said homeless advocacy groups, I like this. Homeless advocacy groups that receive funding from the city need to better educate the homeless to clean up after themselves. So basically what she said, this happened about a month ago. She told reporters, whoever was interviewing her, if the city is going to be donating money to these programs, to homeless programs that assist the homeless, then they had better be teaching the homeless to clean up after themselves. If we're going to be giving money to these programs, they should be teaching the homeless to stop doing this. And I think that's fair. San Francisco spent $65 million on street cleaning last year and plans to add nearly $13 million more over the next 2 years. One of the people heading this operation has estimated that half of his street cleaning budget has gone toward cleaning up, feces and needles from homeless encampments and sidewalks. A single pile of human waste takes at least 30 minutes for one of his staffers to clean. This is also affecting conventions coming out to San Francisco. As you know, San Francisco is a beautiful city. Lots of conventions held there. Not as much anymore because they're worried about the cleanliness of the city and just the safety of the city, as well as the factor, causing a drop in conventions. 479-1080-218-5726. Okay, we're about a minute away. Let me do this. Let me remind you, if you're sitting in traffic and you're backed up in traffic, well, you don't have to take that. When you get home, I messed that up. Oh, gosh. Let me try that again. Take 2. This show is being brought to you by I screwed that up. Caller, your name and where you're calling from.
Yeah, this is Lou Birmingham. I'm calling from Capitola.
Okay, sir. What do you got?
Holy City. You want to know about Father Riker? How number 2 on Star Trek? Okay. I worked in Holy City as an artist for close to 30 years with a really close friend of mine who passed away, unfortunately, 2 years ago, and he was like the mayor of Holy City. His name's Tom Stanton. Terrific glass artist, very well known. Anyway, many years ago, we were there, and these 2 guys walk in, and, we didn't know who they were, and people used to drop by all the time because it's, Holy City. They want to know. And we actually had a bunch of memorabilia up on one of the walls at that time with a bunch of stuff.
0. Highway 17, slow moving as you pass the 85 connector. Back to the limit shortly once you make it past Vasona Park. Southbound 1 here in Santa Cruz, slow moving from Soquel Avenue all the way into Aptos. Slowest at 41st Avenue. It's stop and go there. Monterey into Seaside, stop and go as well. Moss Landing, either direction, 10 miles per hour will be your top speed. And that's being optimistic. Stop and go is more like what I'm seeing. Both directions, Moss Landing. Check this out, though. Corral de Tierra, that accident has traffic backed up for a long ways. I rarely see that roadway backed up like that. As you get off of Highway 1, shortly after you make it past the airport there, you're going to run into traffic. It's going to stay stop and go all the way to about San Venancio. That's as you're heading that way, eastbound. 101 southbound through Coyote Valley, 10 miles per hour, then again in Gilroy near 10th Street, and then again near San Juan Road. All of those areas, southbound 101. Your weather forecast for tonight. Patchy fog, increasing clouds, lows around 55 degrees. Tomorrow should be sunny by noon, highs will be around 70 degrees. Small craft advisory out on the Monterey Bay tonight. Northwest winds as well, 5 to 15 knots, gusts of up to 25 knots, wind waves 3 to 4 feet, and northwest swells 3 feet at 14 seconds, along with patchy fog. 5:07 is the time. Headlines are coming up next, and they are being brought to you by Primo Roofing. They would like to remind you that they offer a variety of easy, flexible finance programs, no money down, no income verification, and 100% financing. Call or click for a free estimate, primoroofing.com, 831-443-3605, primoroofing.com, again, or 831-443-3605. If you need a new roof, give Primo Roofing a call or check them out on the internet. 5:08 is the time. Headlines are coming up next. Susan Simon, take it away.
Thanks, Dave. A 3-year-old King City boy was airlifted to a trauma center today after he was ejected from a pickup truck in a 2-vehicle accident in Salinas. The boy landed on Highway 101, which, while still sitting in his improperly installed booster seat, actually it was no longer installed in the vehicle, the little boy suffered major injuries in that accident. The Salinas Police Department is working to determine the identities of a suspect and his victim in an attack that took place earlier this month. The August 7th incident occurred at Natividad Creek State Park. Anyone with information on this case is encouraged to contact the Salinas Police Department. A man who has been arrested in connection with last year's stabbing of a Greenfield woman has been arrested. 30-year-old Agustin Cabrera Serrano was picked up recently in Yuba City. He faces a charge of attempted murder in connection with the stabbing of a 50-year-old woman. He stabbed her 22 times in Greenfield back in January of 2017. His victim underwent emergency surgery and survived that attack. Serrano also faces charges of corporal injury to a cohabitant and making criminal threats. He was booked into Monterey County Jail. Many California cities and counties have passed resolutions to thwart the federal government's plan to open up offshore drilling off the coast of California. And now Ashley Blakehow with the nonprofit group Oceana says state legislative committees are mulling over similar legislation.
We need to put into place appropriate barriers to ensure that we don't risk the types of oil spills off our coast that we've seen before. California's communities and wildlife and local economies cannot afford the devastation that oil spills cause.
Blakehow went on to say that any additional oil leases would increase the threat of a catastrophic leak or blowout, such as Santa Barbara experienced back in 1969. The time now, 10 minutes after 5 p.m. More local news for you coming up at the bottom of the hour. For KSCO, I'm Susan Simon.
When it comes to tough, versatile workhorses, nothing compares to Kubota's full line of RTV Series utility vehicles. Engineered to last and designed to deliver, Kubota's RTV X Series doesn't just lead the way on rugged dependability, it leads the pack. From big jobs to small projects and daily chores. Choose from America's top-selling family of diesel utility vehicles to help you do it all.
C&N Tractors makes it so easy to get a Kubota. C&N Tractors. Give us your tough jobs.
Hi, it's Charlie from the Garden Company, your locally owned garden center. Summer is a season to relax and entertain outdoors, and we have some great ideas for enhancing your yard for you and your guests. We have awesome glazed ceramic pottery in a wide range of colors, shapes, and sizes that are ideal for planting our herbs, succulents, perennials, or dwarf citrus. Add some fun garden art to your landscape with our beautiful bird baths, benches, metal animals, or wind sculptures. And we have a gorgeous selection of lush, blooming hanging baskets, color bowls, flowering perennials, and vines to add instant color to any deck, porch, or patio. To help you maintain the beauty of your yard, let us show you how to get started with a drip irrigation system to conserve water. And of course, we can identify plant health issues and recommend earth-friendly organic solutions. Check out all the possibilities at the Garden Company Nursery and Gift Shop, 2218 Mission Street, across from Safeway on the west side of Santa Cruz. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/thegardenco. The Garden Company Nursery and Gift Shop, proud member of Think Local First.
MeTV is your TV home for memorable entertainment television.
All those in favor of me, say aye. Aye.
From classic comedy,
a whole blooming Brady bunch.
Happy days.
Cheers.
To retro sci-fi.
Lost in space. Batman.
And groundbreaking dramas.
Perry Mason. The Twilight Zone.
You'll love MeTV's variety.
Lucy loves me.
Here's where you can watch MeTV.
MeTV is only on KYMB Channel 27.1 and Comcast Cable Channel 19.
If someone should ask, tell them you heard it on AM 1080 KSCO.
Or 791-080 DM at KSCO.com. I like this song because it makes me feel like a musician. I can play along with this. Yeah, I like it. Elvis Presley on this day, 1960, #1 on the U.S. singles chart with It's Now or Never, also a #1 in the U.K. The song, which was based on the Italian song O Sol Mio, gave Presley his first post-Army #1 hit. You're listening to Flight 1080 KSCO Santa Cruz. We want to welcome you on board. We have a guest coming up. Our guest coming up shortly will be Dennis Etler. I'm sorry about that, Dennis. And we're going to be talking some interesting topics. Keep it tuned in. We are going to take a call from Pete, and he wants to talk about a topic that we brought up in the last hour. Pete, thank you for your call. You're in the air.
Hey, good afternoon, Dave. Hey, I was just going to say, I would rather be hit on the head from behind than have somebody come up behind me and abuse me with a loud horn or a set of Harley Hog things. The girl that hit the girl that did the attack downtown, they let her go today because they asked her, they said, "What were you doing?" And she said, "Oh, I was letting them know. I just was letting them know I was there."
Really?
I mean, that's the defense that a Harley driver said. That's what they say. We just want to let you know I was there. Well, why aren't all cars honking at each other all the time? They're like, "Hey, I'm here. Hey, I'm here." It's because it's a premeditated. They know they're going to do something stupid, so they blow their horns or they hit their pipes or their throttle to scare you, to startle you.
I know.
Hey, I'm going to do something stupid.
I can't stand it. I can't stand loud motorcycles. I don't see a reason for it. If it's really about safety, direct the sound forward, which is the part that you need to be concerned with. I think it's ridiculous that they sit there and they vroom, 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 like we're all deaf.
At 2 in the morning, you can count on it. Almost any bar, anywhere, you get the guys go out and they go down and they want to open those things up. And the thing is, for out of every 10 guys that owns a bike, there's 8 of them that are respectful, but there is a certain percentage, and I kind of would use the analogy of like a modern day computer troll, because they go out there and they light little fires and they take off. There's no way to confront them and say, somebody hits me over the head, I could turn around and say, "Hey, you're not going to do that again." And we're going to talk about it right now. But when you come flying by traffic, boom, boom, you just take off. You've done your damage. Ha, ha, ha. And it's almost like a modern day computer troll to me.
Yeah,
it's like a way to get back at people.
I'm with you there, dude. Totally with you. Thank you for your call,
Have
Pete.
a great night.
479-1080. Okay, Dennis Etler. Sorry about that. Oh, go ahead and pick up that mic right there. Yeah, bring it over to you. There you go. I'll turn it on here. Get some headphones set on you there. Just so
headphones.
Yes, headphones.
These over here?
Yes, sir. Just put those on your head there.
Okay, let me...
Not on your head, but put them on your ears, because it won't
take this
work.
off and
You kind of have to go on your ears. There you go. All right.
Okay.
All right, Dennis, how you doing?
I'm doing just fine, thanks.
Okay,
And
good.
you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for showing up.
Ask and I shall be here.
It was fantastic. It was almost like it was meant to be, because yesterday Kenny Thomas brought a whole bunch of people in, and I was telling them, I go, man, I got nobody to help me out for tomorrow. And Coral said, hey, I know this guy, Dennis Adler. He's a fantastic, you'll really dig him. So she handed me your number. Things worked out, and now you're here.
And here I am.
And you're here. Okay, so some of the things that you are interested in, you sent me an email, said that we could talk about contemporary China along with human evolution. Those topics you find interesting?
Well, yeah, that's basically my whole adult life has rotated around those two topics. Got my doctorate in paleoanthropology. That's the study of human evolution. Human evolutionary biology. I got that up at UC Berkeley back in the 90s, studying under the most preeminent physical and biological anthropologists of that time, of ever, really. People like Desmond Clark and F. Clark Howell and, on and on, really preeminent people in their field. And I did my research in China, actually, studying Homo erectus and various fossil apes in southern China and Yunnan. Prior to that, I had studied Chinese language and literature. And, I was an anthropology undergraduate at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, focusing again on what was then called physical anthropology. So China and my interest in China and human evolution have been intertwined my whole adult life, and I was fortunate enough to be one of the first U.S. Scientists to actually conduct my doctoral research in China back in the 80s. I went to China. I was there from the mid-'80s through the mid-'90s, and have been back a few times since. So I'm pretty well versed in all things Chinese and anything dealing with human evolution.
Okay. You say you spent a lot of your time dealing in these two subjects. How do they correlate? How do they relate to each other?
Well, I've had this...
Or do they?
Oh, they definitely do.
Okay.
I've had this fascination with human evolution going back to when I was a kid. Back in New Jersey, and I just was one of those, dinosaur kids, whatever, human evolution,
Sure.
Neanderthals, all that, fascinated with it. I've always been fascinated with China because it was so different. It was like a different world, totally independent of, the rest of the world for most of its history. They didn't need us. We needed them. We got so much from China over the millennia. We wouldn't have had the modern world if it hadn't been for China.
What are some of the
so I could go on, but the two things have always been intertwined with me. And back in the 80s, when China was beginning to open up, there were lots of new fossil discoveries. Of course, China is very well known. Back in the 20s, you might recall Peking Man, as it's called. Discovered at a site outside of Beijing, as we know.
Who was Peking Man, by the way?
Peking Man is now understood to be a variant of Homo erectus.
Okay.
And Homo erectus, of course, is recognized to be the ancestor of all living humans, both living and extinct. So it's it's the first fossil ancestor that had most of the capabilities that modern humans have, even though not quite up to speed, but they had a modern human body, and their culture was not as expressive or as developed as that associated with our own species, Homo sapiens, but we basically developed out of Homo erectus.
Okay.
As did Neanderthals and all the other variants of archaic human that populated the old world prior to the dispersal of modern humans within the last couple of 100,000 years. So, and China is one of the focal points for the study of human evolution because of the many fossils of Homo erectus that are found throughout the country.
Okay, we're speaking with Dennis Etler. If you have any questions, would you be willing to take questions from our guests?
Sure.
Okay.
No problem.
So you're, I'm not real familiar with evolution and all this. I am. I guess I'm not a creationist, so I have nothing against evolution. I just don't know. The
sure.
steps of this.
Most people
and my
don't.
understanding is that Africa was the cradle of civilization, right? We evolved.
it
The
goes
first
like
life
this.
came from there. Or the first upright.
We evolved. Our species and our ancestors evolved out of fossil apes that populated the old world in the Miocene epoch, and that's from around 8 to 25 million years ago. And fossil apes were spread throughout Africa, Europe, and Asia at that time. And one of those lineages eventually led to pre-human ancestors. As far as we know, that lineage evolved in Africa, and we're talking about a time span between, say, 2 and 6 or 7 million years ago, what are known as Australopithecines. And we're not, we can get into that if you're interested, but it's a long story. But more advanced forms of Homo, that's the genus we belong to, Homo sapiens, evolved out of some aspect of the radiation of Australopithecine pre-humans somewhere between 2 and 3 million years ago. And Homo erectus was one of those branches that eventually evolved into ourselves. So it's a long story.
I'm going to sound like a total idiot, I'm sure, because I have nowhere near the studies that you have.
Right.
Were there at different time or at some point on this earth upright beings aside from what would become us? I mean, so was there Neanderthals and along with Homo sapiens and
there have
whatever?
been many, many, many different species of what are now referred to as hominins.
Okay.
They used to be called hominids, but the terminology has changed as we've gotten better knowledge of modern, primate diversity, and it's a complicated subject. But there have been many lineages of these pre-humans, these Australopithecines who stood erect on 2 legs. They had the brain about the size of a living ape. And they some of them may have begun to use stone tools, but most of them probably didn't. They were still somewhat adapted for life in the trees. From one of those species of Australopithecine that began adapting to more open environments, eventually gave rise to the genus Homo, which was distinguished by an increase in relative brain size, a shift to, the procurement of meat, mostly scavenged meat, apparently, and the use of very simple stone tools to access that meat, by knocking off a flake with a sharp edge, to cut through the meat, sort of like a knife or what's called a chopping tool, a chopper, to basically a cobble that had flakes knocked off, some of which may have served, as a knife, but the cobble itself was used to smash open bone to get at the marrow and, things like that, yeah.
And you found a lot of this in China. There's a lot of.
There's a lot. Actually, I was working on an archaeological site in north central China. That's probably one of the very oldest in Eurasia. Maybe 1.4, 1.5 million year old early Stone Age site. Some of the earliest material of that sort known in China, in Eurasia for that matter. Earlier sites of that sort are known in Africa, going back 2.5, maybe even 3 million years.
Wow, that is unbelievable. I never hear that, or maybe I have and just never paid attention to it.
Yeah, well, there's stories in the press every so often when a new discovery is made. Of course, this is something that I've been fascinated with since I was a kid, so I keep up with it. I taught at Cabrillo here for nearly 20 years, physical anthropology and whatnot.
Wow. If you have any questions for our guest, give us a call, 479-1080. We are here again with Dennis Etler, and we are talking human evolution, contemporary China. Our first call is from John. He is on line 2. You're in the air, John.
Hi, Dennis. I'm a former student of yours from Cabrillo. I really enjoyed your class. Think about it a lot. I was wondering if you might elaborate or tell us a little bit about like how going to China as a scientist and interacting with the Chinese scientists and their culture and history, and within the field of anthropology and paleontology and our own tradition, how that interaction was. You know, what did we learn from their perspective and them from our perspective, and what we discover together? You know, what does it mean for the field of the science in a bigger issue? I know it's kind of an abstract thing, but I think you could speak to that because you've actually been on both sides. Does that make sense?
Go ahead. Do you have anything to say, Dennis?
Well, I mean, I don't know if you have a question. I mean, I can talk about.
I just wondered how the interaction was between our American style of science and the Chinese style of science. By the way, the last time I talked to you, you told me about a paper by Stedman et al. About a human genetic mutation that led to release of pressure on the jaw and allowed for the expansion of the brain case. Very fascinating paper and all that. I don't know if you remember that, but so I know you know a lot about science in general, but I was hoping that you might comment more on your experience about being an American scientist going to China and interacting with a growing Chinese science that has like ancient roots as well.
Any comments, Dennis?
Oh, well, I can continue talking about human evolution. I can talk about China. China is always in the news, so most of what we read about China in the mainstream media is total nonsense. You know, lots of misinformation, disinformation, half-truths, or just plain and simple fabrications. Since I read Chinese and follow the Chinese press and you know, I can read the stories about China in the Western media, and I can see straight away, you know, where they're totally misinterpreting what's going on there. Fill things out about a bit. I was married to a woman from Beijing for 25 years. We're still, family, even though we don't live together. But nonetheless, when I was in China back in the 80s and 90s, before China had really opened up as it later did, when China was very much as it had been, and I was one of the very few, Americans in China at that time. So I was really an oddball, but I was actually, accepted by one and all. I was married to a Chinese woman. We had 2 young kids. My wife's father was an eminent Chinese botanist, retired at that time, getting into his senior years in his late 70s, early 80s, highly revered by one and all. And, we lived in the family residence in what later became China's Silicon Valley, an area called Zhongguancun, where the Chinese Science Academy is located. So there were lots of schools, universities, Peking University, Tsinghua University in the vicinity. So lots of scientists and other personnel, but also lots of common people. So we stayed in my in-laws' apartment, old-fashioned sort of, housing block. They had a 3-bedroom flat, with a kitchen and a dining room. I mean, of course, the accoutrements were quite basic, but it was comfortable, and I lived right in the Chinese community without any problem. I traveled throughout China in the 80s and 90s. Since I spoke Chinese, I traveled independently. I traveled with friends, traveled with colleagues, never had one problem traveling throughout the country. I just, whenever I came usually during the summers, sometimes during winter break. I didn't even have to let anybody know I was there. There would be the local constabulary, and they'd be notified that I was visiting, and they never batted an eye, and I never had anything to do with them, and everything went hunky-dory. I had a wonderful time in China throughout my stay there. All the impressions that people in the West have about China just totally ill-founded. I mean, I lived there. I wasn't living in hotels. I was living right there in the midst of the Chinese community. I can tell people, what was my daily life like, if people are interested.
Yeah, I think we'll get to all that. We're speaking again with Dennis Etler. He'll be here for the next, you going to be here till 7?
Sure.
All right. Sounds good. If you have any questions, be sure to get on hold or get online here, 479-1080, 218-5726, DM at ksco.com. We are about to break for news, traffic, and weather. We'll keep the traffic and weather short, though. Get back to the calls. Dan, keep it in there. Bill, hang in there. Caller 3, you hang in there. We'll be right back on the other side with your phone calls. 479-1080, DM at ksco.com. We are heading to local news. Susan Simon is standing by with those. KSCO News Time, 6:32. Susan Simon is ready to go. Take it away, Susan.
Thanks, Dave. A 22-year-old man was transported to an area hospital after he was shot when he lunged at Watsonville police officers today with a kitchen knife in his hand. That after the man's family told officers he was on drugs and was hallucinating. The suspect, who also threw rocks at cars on Ohlone Parkway, was reportedly shot once in the torso. Initially, Main Street was closed between Clifford Drive and Ohlone Parkway. And then a short time after that, between Green Valley Road and Longview Drive, the entirety of Main Street has apparently reopened at this point. A San Francisco woman was arrested in Santa Cruz after she hit someone on the back of the head for no reason. Her victim flagged down a Santa Cruz police officer, and that officer arrested 46-year-old Catherine Galbraith, who was on court release from a previous arrest. Galbraith has since been booked into Santa Cruz County Jail. Although full containment is expected today still for the Ferguson fire burning near Yosemite National Park, interior parts of the forest may continue to smolder and burn for some time, causing lingering smoke. Yosemite Valley reopened to visitors yesterday, as did the Wawona and Mariposa Groves. However, Glacier Point is still closed to the public. For more information, people are encouraged to go online to nps.gov/YOSE or call the national park. The Neptune Pool at Hearst Castle is expected to reopen for public tours in the next few weeks. The iconic tourist attraction was closed down and drained in 2014, so a $5.4 million restoration project could take place. All of the old tiles were removed, and the cracks in the concrete shell of the pool were filled with expandable polyurethane foam. The concrete shell was then sanded and resurfaced, and a waterproof liner was added before 15,000 replica tiles from the original source were installed to complete the restoration. The time now 34 minutes after 5 p.m. More local news for you coming up at the top of the hour. For KSCO, I'm Susan Simon.
Super nerds and computers. I'm KO, and I'll be right back with your sports question of the day.
You have an idea that can make the world a better place, and yourself a lot of money. Fair warning, the U.S. is a first-to-file jurisdiction. The first to file a patent on your invention owns it and all its commercial returns. So be first to file with Central Coast Patent Agency, a locally owned business with 45 years of experience.
From DataRam Chief Technologist Jason Calkins, Central Coast Patent Agency has worked with me on over 15 patents. The portfolio has generated multi-million-dollar returns for my company. I highly recommend them.
Contact Central Coast Patent Agency and meet the pros.
Hello, I'm Don Boys. Our Central Coast Patent Agency has won over 1,000 patents for people just like you, and we take great pride in our ability to reduce the cost and time it takes to win your patent.
Be first to file with CentralCoastPatent.com. CentralCoastPatent.com. Own it. CentralCoastPatent.com.
Former MLB All-Star Jason Worth is retired and opinionated. During a recent podcast appearance, the retired ballplayer lit up the head sheds of baseball teams across the nation for being too reliant on analytics. After 15 seasons in the MLB, Worth has seen a revolution in how players are evaluated, and he feels as though analytics are killing the game. Worth said, "They've got all these super nerds in the front office that know nothing about baseball." He even went so far as to say that relying too heavily on analytics has taken the human element out of the game. Question for all. Were you hired by a nerd analyzing your numbers? Or by a manager analyzing your interpersonal skills? Answer today's question and learn how yesterday's question was answered by logging on to KSCO.com. That's KSCO.com.
Thanks for listening to AM 1080 KSCO.
Or 7910880, listening to Flight 1080 KSCO Santa Cruz. If you're sitting in traffic, good news here is that there's no major incidents. It's just your garden variety rush hour traffic. Just give it some time. Keep it tuned in to KSCO Santa Cruz, and you will get there. We're hanging out today with Dennis Adler and you. If you want to get on board, Bill on the cell phone is up next. Plenty of room for you. 479-1080, 218-5726. Dennis, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. I'm not hearing anything too much.
You're not. You know what? You got to wiggle that. Wiggle the jiggle there. There you go. Yeah. We're nothing but the best here. Bill is calling from a cell phone. You're in the air, Bill.
Hey, thanks. Your little blurb on sitting in traffic doesn't make me feel any better. Anyway, Dr. Adler, I did a DNA test about 12 months ago, and it said that I have 75% more Neanderthal DNA than the average customer. Which, as far as I could tell, only means that I have less back hair than 75% of the customers. Anyway, my question, being Neanderthal, I'm not sure that there are any Neanderthal rights groups or representative minorities. And are there any benefits that I'm missing out on in Neanderthal?
Well, you might want to form one yourself. I'm not aware of any... any identity politics around being a Neanderthal yet. But, the thing is, Neanderthals and, the lineage that gave rise to all living people diverged from one another around 600,000 years ago. And the Neanderthals, after that, had a pretty separate, unique evolutionary trajectory. But if you know much about evolutionary biology, that's not enough to really have species become differentiated enough from one another that they are incapable of interbreeding. So, there definitely was interbreeding between Neanderthals and modern people as modern people began dispersing into the areas in which they lived. So that just means that, they got it on, So it really doesn't, it's kind of academic, sort of a little play on words there, as to whether you want to consider Neanderthals and modern people separate species. They pretty much, apparently, could do pretty much everything that, Homo sapiens could do, and they obviously, did find each other attractive enough to have babies together.
Or they just got drunk. I mean, you don't have to find them attractive, right?
Probably, they had a different, aesthetic back then. But nonetheless, Neanderthal genes did enter into the modern human gene pool. And some of them seem to have been really important to help modern people who are really adapted to a much more tropical type of environment to adapt to more northern climes. The people who spread out of Africa now, probably 120 or more thousand years ago, and we can get into all of that. But anyway, they were not well adapted to the more temperate or even Arctic-like conditions that they found themselves confronted with. The Neanderthals had been in those northerly latitudes for hundreds of thousands of years, had adapted to it evolutionarily, physically, and they certainly had certain genes. And by that, I mean variants of genes that we share that were better adapted to the environments in which they lived. And those apparently, some of them at least, got passed on into modern humans and proliferated and became fixed in those modern human populations. So we have it varies between 3 and 5% of the extra African human genome are alleles, those are gene variants derived from Neanderthals that evolved in Neanderthal populations and made their way into modern human populations. To have that, degree of Neanderthal DNA within modern human populations means that at times in the past it was much higher. So at some point, probably soon after modern humans dispersed into Eurasia, you might have had 10% of the genome of Homo sapiens being derived from Neanderthals.
Wow, man, that is interesting. I had never.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Never knew that stuff. No wonder why you've been fascinated. How long have you been studying this? I mean, your whole life, you said, right?
Well, my earliest memories go back to when I was growing up in the Bronx. That's when I was 5, 6, 7 years old. I had a hand puppet, which was like a monkey named Jocko. And I used to go to the Bronx Zoo with the family with my hand puppet, and we'd go to the primate house, and I'd be talking to the monkeys with my hand puppet. So it goes back
quite a ways.
As far back as I can remember.
I'm glad you're here with us, Dan. I didn't know you did. Wow, I had no expectations. I'm glad you. Wow, I'm blown away. Thank you for joining us again. Let's head out to Royal Oaks. Dan is calling. You're in the air, Dan. Dan, are you there? Dan, come on. He might be listening on delay. There's an 8-second delay. So, Dan, turn off your radio. We'll pick you back up. Make sure you turn off your radio, though, because that will confuse you and throw your timing off. Dan, you're in the air.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. I have a question for your guest, and I need for him to explain to me how he dates rocks, bones, trees, whatever. And it comes down to what I hear is they call it carbon dating.
Yeah, there are a variety. Go on.
Yeah, I hear that carbon dating has a major percentage of being right or wrong. And then I remember about 10 years ago or so, there was some scientists that came up with a more efficient way to date old things, and basically they were just shut down. So could you tell me about that, please?
Oh, for sure. Well, first off, carbon dating is one of many, many various techniques to date ancient material. Carbon-14 has a limit. It's all about the decay of a naturally occurring isotope of carbon called carbon-14 that decays over time into isotope of nitrogen. And we know the decay rate. It's called a half-life. And we've been able to figure out, basically the various variables that enter into the decay of carbon-14 into nitrogen-12. It's only good for dating organic material, and it has, because of the relatively quick decay of carbon-14, it's only good for up to maybe 35,000 to 50,000 years ago. Now, there's been some controversy regarding carbon-14, not its efficacy. It's, the physics is well understood and foolproof. But change in atmospheric conditions, change in the natural amount of carbon-14 in the environment. There are some fluctuations that have occurred, but there's many ways of of studying that, and that's basically been refined to the extent that it's extremely reliable. Okay, now there are many other techniques for dating, which involve dating non-organic materials, basically potassium, radioactive isotopes of potassium that basically form during volcanic activity. So wherever there's lots of volcanoes and lots of volcanic eruptions and tuffs, ash falls and lava flows, and many areas that have human and other fossil remains are in these highly volcanic areas, and it's like a layer cake. So, there'll be some strata, those are, earth layers that are laid down by lakes and rivers, and then there'll be an ash fall or a lava flow, and then over, hundreds of thousands, millions of years, there'll be a sequence of deposits. That's known as the study of stratigraphy. You can date the basalts and other volcanic materials using radiometric dating techniques such as potassium argon, uranium series. There's a whole set of these techniques. If you have a cell phone, if you watch TV, or use any modern technology, you're using the same scientific knowledge that allows us to date this material. So, I mean, if you don't want to believe it, then don't watch TV or listen to the radio.
479-1080, I hear that when in relation to creation, right? So people who believe in God, some religious people say that the Earth is only 6,000 years old, and the carbon dating.
People can say whatever they damn please.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to argue with them because their minds are made up. I mean, they're not going to listen to reason. So why even bother?
479-1080. Let's head out to Aptos. Flinks, you're in the air.
Hey, I had a question. Maybe your guest doesn't know, but on humans contributing to the climate and climate change and stuff, I was wondering, because I'm trying to research it and find out numbers on it, like percentages. You'd think if it was science and it was scientifically proven that there was climate change caused by humans, they'd have a percentage of how much of that climate is being changed by the humans. I don't think it's 100%. Maybe it's like 25 or 30 or 40% or whatever that number is. But do you know anything on that, or is that kind of not in your science?
Well, no, I'm very familiar with the science of climate change because it impacts considerably on an understanding of human evolution. Now, one thing, of course, the climate is in a constant state of change. It hasn't been the way it is now, forever. If you look back at, geologic time, the climate has fluctuated remarkably. I mean, everybody knows about the ice ages. They weren't so long ago. Only 12,000 years ago was the end of the last ice age. And there have been, periodic ice ages and then, periods of temperate climate like what we have now. You go back 50, 60 million years ago, at the beginning of the era that we live in, geologically speaking, what's called the Cenozoic, and temperatures were 8 degrees centigrade higher on average than they are today. I mean, there were palm trees growing north of the Arctic Circle, and crocodiles and alligators up in Hudson Bay. And
really?
Oh, for sure. I mean, we live in a much cooler planet than it's been in the past. Climate temperatures, annual temperatures have been declining throughout the last 60 million years, with some fluctuations, of course. The thing is, modern human civilization emerged after the last ice age in a period that's relatively temperate, and we're well adapted to it. So the question is, can we adapt to, changes in the climate, rather abrupt? And there have been abrupt climate change in the past, long before we were living the type of life we live today. I mean, you can go out, like what the continental shelf is,
sure,
right?
Sure.
Well, if you went back in your time machine 15, 20,000 years ago, we would be inland. Santa Cruz would be inland. The shore would be 15, 20, 50, maybe 100 miles offshore. The extent of the continental shelf used to be dry land.
Wow.
Because with the ice, or those gigantic ice sheets that covered Canada and down into the continental U.S., well, that's a hell of a lot of ice. That's a lot of water. Those ice sheets, they were 1 mile to 2 miles thick. Well, where did all that water come from? Well, it lowered the sea level considerably by a couple of 100 meters. So there were land bridges, and the continental shelf was exposed to its dry land. So,
wow, that is amazing. Because locally we know here in Santa Cruz that this area was covered with water. I had never thought, though, that it was the shoreline was out further from the coast.
Oh, well, the Channel Islands?
Yes.
Right?
Uh-huh.
Have you ever been there?
No.
Well, there's a museum there. And, how far off the coast are the Channel Islands? 20 miles?
Something like that.
Something like that, right? Well, guess what? There were mammoths on the Channel Islands. Mammoths, okay? You know what a mammoth is, right?
Uh-huh.
Big,
big hairy elephants.
Big elephants, relatives of the elephants during, the ice ages and the interglacial periods. Well, how could mammoths survive on the Channel? How did they get there? How could they survive on the Channel? Can you imagine a big mammoth on the Channel Islands that you visited?
Yeah, it must have walked there, you're saying, right?
Well, what happened
a land
is
bridge.
that, first off, the mammoths on the Channel Islands became dwarfed. They stood at the shoulder more than 5 feet tall.
That is amazing, and this is part of the evolutionary process because the food source wasn't as big,
right.
I would think,
so what
right?
happened is that when sea levels were lower, the mammoths just walked off to what eventually became the Channel Islands. It was just part of the mainland. But as sea levels rose, some of those populations got isolated on the Channel Islands, and the landmass got shrunk. As sea levels rose, the Channel Islands were much larger than they are now until they got to the size they are. And the mammoths, which were full-size, over generational time, had to adapt. And the smaller they were, the better able they were to survive and reproduce. So eventually, they got dwarfed. It's called island dwarfing, and it's very common.
Is that the same thing that happened to what they called the Hobbit, right? So they find this different species of hominid.
Yeah. Right.
That must something like that happened
right.
there?
Yeah, some people think that might have been a similar phenomenon. And on that same island of Flores, in the Indonesian archipelago, they have pygmy stegodonts. Stegodonts is a relative of elephants that evolved in Asia, and they had it was like a lost world. You had these really short-statured people, and in that part of the world, still today, there are very short-statured people. Some people no more than 4 foot tall.
Wow.
These so-called hobbits were about 3 foot tall, or 3 to 3.5 foot tall, and there were these, dwarfed elephants, if you will. But then there were these giant dragons, the Commodore dragon.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Well, they had those there as well, but they were 2 to 3 times the size of the living ones, which are pretty big. They would have been like dinosaurs for these little people. And then there were these giant, rodents, that would have been, relatively speaking, the size of a cow.
Damn, holy cow.
That's
huge.
Holy cow, exactly. So, it was a crazy, crazy place. So, and that's all because this island apparently was cut off from the rest of the archipelago as sea levels rose.
479-1080, dm@ksco.com. On the internet, sometimes it's hard to filter through fake news, what's real, what's not, what's been photoshopped, what's not. I saw pictures from China, somewhere in China, of giant salamanders. Were those real or not?
Oh, yeah, there is a giant salamander.
As big as they looked? These things were huge.
They are huge. They are big.
As big as a person laying down and you put 4 legs on them.
Yeah, they're the largest salamanders in the world.
Wow.
And they are endangered, but they're making mighty efforts to, protect them now.
Wow. So when was the last time you were in China?
That's been too long. I was last there around 2010. I definitely want to get back, but it just hasn't been possible. But I plan to travel there now that I'm fully retired, and hopefully I'll be getting some money from the sale of my house. I should have the freedom and the means to travel, and I have lots of friends and family still in China, so I definitely want to go back.
The Chinese culture and the Chinese culture is very into education, right?
Oh, yeah.
Have they always been like this? So you study the culture. Have they always been on the cutting edge of development and on the cutting edge of advancing?
Oh, sure. We got to realize that China underwent a really traumatic period in its history from the Opium War in 1840 until, the end of World War II, a 100-year period when China, and they call it the century of humiliation. Because prior to 1840, you go back to 1800, when the U.S. was just a fledgling country.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, China's GDP, as calculated in retrospect, and economists know how to do that, was about 1/3 of the world's GDP.
Wow.
I mean, everybody was beating a path to China. A lot of the furniture that in colonial America was from China. All of that, because they were making copies of French furniture and all and whatnot. They had the skill, to do that. They were just copying, the style, but they had the tool making and working techniques very highly refined. And of course, there were the porcelains. The porcelain was a deeply held secret process in China, the making of China, right? We call it China.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And the Europeans were just really trying to find out, the Europeans were trying to steal China's intellectual property. They were trying to steal porcelain making. They were trying to steal silk making.
Mm-hmm.
So it was the Europeans who were the ones that started in with this so-called intellectual property theft, right?
They started it.
They started it and continued it. And then, the opium. You know anything about the opium?
No.
Okay. So, China was far wealthier than any other nation in the world at that time and for centuries prior. You remember Marco Polo went to China and was flabbergasted by its wealth and sophistication. And, all the Europe, why was America discovered? Because they wanted to find a sea route to China, right? They wanted to get to the Spice Islands, Indonesia.
That's right.
Wanted to get to China. You had the China Clippers going back and forth, I mean, the earliest millionaires or billionaires in this country made their fortunes with the China trade, So anyway, the British wanted to, get into this market, but the Chinese said, we're going to control our own customs. We're going to control the inflow and outflow of goods and services. We're not going to let you guys do it. Well, no, the British, with the East India Company, they wanted a monopoly on the China trade. So the Chinese weren't cooperating. So what the British did was decide to basically begin importing opium into China.
Oh, geez, and that caused a whole bunch of stuff.
The Chinese said, no way, we don't want this opium. The British Empire, they were the first drug cartel.
Jeez.
And they fought two wars with China called the Opium Wars in 1840 and 1842, forcing the Chinese to take
6:05 is the time. We've got your King of the Hill traffic update. We start off in the Hollister-Gilroy area, northbound 101 near Tennant Avenue on-ramp. A traffic hazard reported at 5:53. No further details. Be on the lookout anyways, though. That's probably just to be on the safe side is a good idea. Southbound 1 here in Santa Cruz is slow-moving from SoCal Avenue into Aptos. Slowest, of course, at 41st Avenue, where it is stop and go. Monterey into Seaside, 10 miles per hour will be your top speed. Same thing in Moss Landing. Maybe even stop-and-go traffic is what you should expect as you approach the harbor, especially from the southbound direction. So if you're traveling northbound, you can expect even slower traffic than that. Southbound 101, Coyote Valley into Morgan Hill, 10 miles per hour, top speed. Your weather forecast for tonight, patchy fog is expected along with increasing clouds. Low should be around 55 degrees. Tomorrow, sunny by noon. Highs will be around 70 degrees. Your boaters forecast for tonight includes a small craft advisory. That will remain in effect throughout the evening. You should also expect northwest winds 5 to 15 knots, gusts of up to 25 knots, wind waves 3 to 4 feet, and northwest swells around 3 feet at 14 seconds, along with patchy fog. 6:07 is the time. Wednesday is a day. That means it is your time to pick up a fantastic deal at Mountain Mike's Pizza right here on Portola Drive in Live Oak. 3715 Portola Drive is their address. Today's special, $5 off any large pizza. You go in there, you pick it out, $5 off instantly. Mountain Mike's Pizza. Portola Drive, 3715 is their address. 477-7760 is their phone number. KSCO headlines up next. The time is 6:07. Susan Simon, ready to go.
Thanks, Dave. Good evening, everyone. A Hollister man tried to flee from police officers earlier this month, but was caught. Although 35-year-old Adam Mendoza was throwing things as he fled from officers, he still had a large amount of cash, brass knuckles, and suspected methamphetamine on him when he was caught. Mendoza was booked into San Benito County Jail. The Salinas Police Department is working to determine the identities of a suspect and his victim in an attack that took place earlier this month. The August 7th incident occurred at Natividad Creek State Park. Anyone with information on this case is encouraged to contact the Salinas Police Department. A 3-year-old King City boy was airlifted to a trauma center today after he was ejected from a pickup truck during a 2-vehicle accident in Salinas. The boy landed on Highway 101 while sitting in what had been his improperly installed booster seat. The little boy suffered major injuries in that accident. Several brush fires slowed down traffic during the afternoon commute on Highway 101 in Salinas yesterday. The fire in the center divider near Laurel Drive was put out by 6 p.m., but then another small fire ignited near the Spence Road exit. Several drivers stopped to stomp that one out. A housing bond will be on the ballot in Santa Cruz County this November. 3rd District Supervisor Ryan Coonerty spoke with KSCO about how it came about.
In the case of the housing bond, there was a community group made up of everybody from union folks to small business people, housing activists who had been meeting for a couple years to put together this bond to work with all the cities and the county and figure out what's the amount. And they did polling, and really they created a package and then brought it to us and asked us to put it on the ballot to let the voters decide in November. And it was a thoughtful measure, and it had support from really across the spectrum.
If approved by voters, the $140 million affordable housing bond would fund the development of more than 1,000 new affordable housing units in Santa Cruz County, as well as providing money for loans for first-time homebuyers and also for homeless services programs. The time now, 10 minutes after 6 p.m. More local news for you coming up at the bottom of the hour. For KSCO, I'm Susan, who clearly can't breathe, Simon.
Join us for the Monterey Bay Birding Festival, September 28th through 30th. We are excited to announce 2 world-renowned authors, novelist Jonathan Franzen, talking about the seabirds, and naturalist and illustrator John Muir Laws, who will present Thinking Like a Naturalist. To learn more about the festival and register, go to MontereyBayBirding.org, sponsored in part by KSCO.
Hi, everyone. This is Meg over at Billama Market. Here are just a couple of things I want you to keep in mind. First, we have an ice cream parlor in the front of the store where we serve local Mary Ann's ice cream. You can get a scoop or more, milkshake, banana split, or a sundae, and sit there and eat it or munch away while you shop. Second, it's summer, and the fruits of the season in our produce department are spectacular, ripe, sweet, and so flavorful. So grab some of nature's candy, cherries, peaches, plums, and all the berries, and make yourself a wonderful fruit salad or a dessert topping or just a great snack. And third, the folks in the meat department love special orders, so don't hesitate to ask for steaks cut a little thinner, or that you want Korean-style short ribs or a boneless pork shoulder roast, etc. Whatever you want, these guys will make it happen for you. And while you're in the meat department, check out their sale. So stop by, come on in, and see for yourself what's on sale throughout the rest of the store. And thank you for shopping with us at Ben Lomond Market.
The Cannabis Connection is the voice of ecological alignment and community empowerment in the California cannabis trade, continuing the Santa Cruz legacy of environmental stewardship and progressive educational realization. Our goal is to fill the void in empirical understanding around cannabis. Join us Fridays 8 to 9 p.m. on KSCO AM 1080 to engage with informed speakers shedding light on the rapidly evolving cannabis renaissance.
This is KSCO, Santa Cruz, Monterey, Salinas. 479-1080. You're listening to Flight 1080 KSCO Santa Cruz. Looks like you just found yourself a new friend there, Dennis. Susan shooting some breeze with you about the Bronx. So you're from?
No, originally left when I was 10 for Jersey, and then spent my teenage years there before I went off to the University of Wisconsin-Madison. That's where I did my undergraduate work back in the mid-'60s. So I was there for the whole counterculture, the anti-war stuff. Madison, well, the University of Wisconsin is one of the top flight universities, of course, and excuse me. Back then it was called the Third Coast. You had, Columbia on the East Coast, Berkeley on the West Coast, and Madison on what was called the Central Coast.
479-1080-218-5726. You need to take a drink of water, or do you need more water?
That's okay.
If you want to get on board, we're speaking with Dennis Etler. Fantastic. We are talking contemporary China, human evolution, and whatever else. If you have any questions, give us a call, 479-1080. You can also send a text to 218-5726, DM at ksco.com with your emails. Okay, Dennis? All right, you got a drink of water there? Better?
Yeah, I'm doing better now.
Okay. Let's see. What else you want to talk about? Anything else you want to mention before we get on to the next topic?
Well, I was talking a little bit about, all of the misinformation and disinformation about
let's
China.
get into that. Let's get into that.
All these talking points. And see here, the same thing from all the news sources: unfair trade practices, forced technology exchange, intellectual property theft, stealing jobs, etc. It's all bunk. It's all baloney. China does not steal jobs. U.S. corporations outsource jobs to China. How is that China stealing jobs? China had a workforce that was educated enough. Wages in China are much lower here, but the cost of living is a fraction of is here. China, its government is very proactive. They have lots of infrastructure that they built, like unlike many other developing countries. You know, the Chinese government invested untold billions of dollars developing first-rate infrastructure. So China had all the ingredients that multinational corporations were looking for. Relatively cheap labor force, good infrastructure, educated workforce that could do the work demanded of them, willing to do the work. You know, the Chinese are very industrious. So they started outsourcing jobs to China, you know, factories and work. But that was part of the shift to a service economy. Do you remember in the 1990s, everybody talked about the post-industrial economy, that we were entering into a service economy.
Sure.
We didn't want these factories anymore. We wanted to send all these dirty, polluting factories over to China.
Yeah.
Let those Chinese work in those sweatshops. We don't want them anymore.
Yeah.
So how the hell is that China stealing our jobs? They didn't steal one damn job, I'll tell you that. We shipped those jobs over there because we wanted to. And guess what? American corporations made not millions, not billions. They made trillions of dollars in profit by doing that. So why do we talk about China stealing our jobs? That's total, to put it simply, BS. Okay, that's one thing. China did not steal one U.S. job.
That's a great point.
Okay, now what about intellectual property theft? How many times has a case been brought up to the WTO, the World Trade Organization, founded by the United States, or to U.S. courts? They could be brought, for copyright infringement, patent infringement. They could be brought up on charges so that they would be penalized right here in this country. But you know who is involved in those cases of patent infringement and copyright infringement?
Who?
Samsung, Google, you know, all these big IT companies, you know, based in Japan, based in the U.S. They're the ones always fighting with these billion-dollar settlements because, you know that, right?
Yeah.
You don't see Chinese companies paying out like that. Why? If they're such intellectual property thieves, why aren't they brought up on charges?
Then why are we hearing this from so much of the... Because it's not just the left.
Damn propaganda.
It's not just the left or right. It's both.
It's everybody.
Yeah.
Because China is a threat. It's not a threat of their own choosing. It's a threat because of our damn incompetence. Because China is developing. They have an industrial plan. We used to have an industrial plan. Mm-hmm. Germany has an industrial plan. You know, the U.S., when we became an industrial country, was because the government supported industry. That's all that the Chinese are doing. They have a plan. They think ahead. They're looking out for the benefit of their people. You know, the China, all these low-paying jobs are running away from China because China, the wages are increasing on an annual basis, 10, 15%.
Wow.
Our wages have stagnated over the last 30 years. Over the last 10 years, average Chinese pay is going up 10, 15% a year. Now, how can that be? It's because they have policies there that encourage that.
Is that sustainable?
Yeah, it is. Because they want to go from these low-paying, low value-added jobs. They want to go up the food chain. So they get, more educated, more sophisticated. And that gets, so that gets into, we talked about intellectual property theft. Mm-hmm. All these tech companies engage in intellectual property theft.
Sure.
Okay, so that's another myth. And then the forced technology exchange. That's the third myth.
All right, explain to me what that is, what that's about.
Okay. Well, Trump, and not only Trump, but all the Democrats, they say, well, when a U.S. company goes to China, the Chinese force them to get into a joint venture where, they have to share their knowledge, their, manufacturing techniques and all of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then this then allows the Chinese to copy, design and production, and then, begin competing with these U.S. companies. Well, that's another myth. How is a Chinese company going to produce iPhones for Apple if they don't know the design? I mean, come on, they're going to do it blindfolded? Of course they need to know how these products are designed if they're going to produce them for American or other multinational companies. Otherwise, it would be like three blind mice.
To whose benefit is it to paint the Chinese as dishonest or stealing our property? To whose benefit is
the politicians? Because it's it's a scapegoat. Mm-hmm. It's a straw man. We can blame everything on those Chinese.
We could blame our own inadequacies or our own inability to adapt and to keep up with the Joneses.
Yeah, because the Chinese they are focused. They know where they want to go. They know how they have to get there. We just, we don't, all we're concerned is, the day after tomorrow. Well, the Chinese are planning 20, 30, 40 years in advance.
Yeah.
And we see, if the projections are right, the Chinese economy will be twice the size of the U.S. economy in 10 or 15 years, 3 times the size of the U.S. economy by mid-century. So you got to be damn sure that, the people who rule this country see China as a threat, not because China is doing anything against us, because they just figure we can't compete against them. So we got to try to tear them down.
One of the scariest videos I've ever seen was, and it's scary, in a different sense than a Bigfoot or alien video. It was scary to watch in a time-lapse photo, and you can watch these videos now of rail stations being built in China, skyscrapers being built in China, and in time-lapse, you can see how much are actually getting done in one day or even an hour, and it is absolutely amazing. I mean, it's amazing. And I would feel proud if I was a Chinese citizen, but being an American, you go, holy cow, man, that is not good. We should be doing that too, right? It's threatening.
Yeah, but it's not the China, not. China's
I know it's not their fault, but just to watch
them.
them
To make it as if it is,
Right.
Now, going back to the high-speed rail,
mm-hmm.
There is 20,000 kilometers of high-speed rail in China. Just think of that, thousands of miles of high-speed rail connecting every major city in China, northwest, north, south, east, west, right? These trains are great. I mean, they're top flight, People, they show videos, where there's a cup on the stand, going at 350 kilometers an hour, and this cup doesn't move, and the way they lay track, I mean, it's like these gigantic segments that are prefabbed, and they just put them down, and the way they build bridges and all of that. They did that in 10 years. We can't even lay, 100 miles of high-speed rail in that length of time. What about the high-speed rail here? I mean, it took them 10 years to lay a high-speed rail between something like Spokane and Vancouver. And that same amount of time, China linked up every city in the entire country. One thing that really gets my goat, if you remember after, the financial collapse in this country, mm-hmm, right? Mm-hmm. 2008, 10 years ago, right? And then everybody was saying at that time China was the engine of the world economy because China was making these massive investments in high-speed rail and all this other infrastructure you're talking about. Mm-hmm. They saved the world from a major depression. They were the economic engine of the world. If it wasn't for China, we would still be in a depression. Okay, another thing. China has bought trillions of dollars of U.S. bonds. They have bought our debt, mm-hmm, to keep us afloat.
Mm-hmm.
If China hadn't bought that debt, we wouldn't be able to sustain our deficits. So China saved the global economy by its massive investments in infrastructure, requiring all of these, imports from Australia and all these other countries that saved those economies from collapsing. And China saved our economy from a gigantic deficit bubble that we wouldn't have been able to finance. So just think of that. China really did a service to us. And then we turn around when China succeeds, and we see that it's continuing to succeed, we turn around and all we can do is China, 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 China this, China that. It's really, for someone who is so familiar with both countries and really appreciates the time I had in that country, it just really disturbs me. It really, it sickens me to see the way that this country has turned its back on China for no damn reason other than it serves political purpose to do so.
479-1080. Let's head out to Livermore. Gary has a question for you. Gary, thank you for your call. You're in the air.
Okay. Well, my question is, the communist government or religion in China is intent on world domination. Should we help them?
China is not intent on world domination. That's another myth. China has enough problems just looking after itself. Doesn't want to dominate anybody. What was the last country that China invaded? We invaded Korea. We invaded Vietnam. We invaded Libya. We invaded Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan. What country has China invaded? Please tell me. World domination. That's just nonsense.
You still there, Gary?
Yeah, it's nonsense, guy.
Okay.
Yeah. They haven't invaded anybody, and they have no intent on doing so. They just want to look after their own. And they have to worry about other countries. We fought 2 wars on the borders of China and Korea and Vietnam. I think China has more to worry about us than we do them.
Protecting ourselves from China.
China's on our borders. How are we protecting ourselves from China? What are you talking about?
China.
What are you talking about? Tell me. When did China station troops on our borders? We had American troops on the borders of China.
Are we going to attack them?
What's that?
Are we going to attack them?
Well, if you had troops, we have troops in Japan, we have troops in Korea, we have troops all around China.
Are we going to attack them?
They damn well better be prepared for that possibility, more so than we have to prepare for any attack from China. China has no interest in attacking us, but they have to wonder, why are all these American troops surrounding us? So, they got to worry about the U.S. attacking them.
Thank you for your call, Gary. 479-1080, DM at KSCO.com. Let's see who's up next. You're in the air. Can I get your name?
Hi, Michael.
Oh, Michael. Yes, you're in the air, Michael.
I am just fascinated by the way we have your guest waxing poetically about the communist nation of China. Has he not any awareness of mobile execution bans? I'm just curious.
That's all nonsense.
That is on record.
What evidence do you have of that?
It's written in U.S. World Affairs Council.
Oh, wow. That's a really neutral source. That's a real neutral source. That's just damn U.S. propaganda. I'm sorry. You have no evidence of that.
Let's talk about the Chinese debt. They own $1 trillion out of 20. What's the percentage of that? You say they own the United States debt. They actually own a small fraction of it relative to the rest of the world.
No, they have they have over $3 trillion of U.S. bonds.
What's your source of that? I see $1 trillion.
It's much more than $1 trillion. And that's a significant amount of money, $1 trillion. Okay, I'll give you $1 trillion. That's a hell of a lot of money, buddy.
Oh, sure it is, but relative to the rest of the world...
You don't know. No, it's more than any other country. It's more than Japan. It's more than any European country. They have, in terms of the percentage of foreign debt owed, they own more than any other country. Not in aggregate, but as a single country, they have more U.S. debt than any other country.
What
about the world domination you decline? The Spratly Islands, they are now claiming the South China Sea.
The South...
Okay,
let's talk about the South China Sea. The Chinese laid claim to the South China Sea way back when in the Qing Dynasty. Taiwan, which sees themselves as the legitimate government of China, even though they only occupy the island of Taiwan, has the same exact claim on the South China Sea as does the People's Republic. Why is that? Because that claim predates World War II and goes all the way back to the Qing Dynasty in the 1800s, if not before. So China has claimed sovereignty, as does Taiwan, as the Republic of China. They've claimed sovereignty over that for over 150 years, if not longer. So the Chinese see that as their sovereign territory with which they can do whatever they damn please.
Thank you for your call.
All as well.
Mark, what's his name again, sir?
Michael.
Thank you for your call, Michael. 479-1080. We got a break for news, traffic, and weather. Keep it tuned in. We'll be right back with your call. Timmy and you on line 3. We're hanging out with Dennis Etler. If you want to get on board, give us a call, send a text, or email. We'll be right back. The time is 6:32. Headlines are coming up next. Susan Simon is ready to go, so take it away, Susan.
Thanks, Dave. Good evening, everyone. A 22-year-old man was transported to an area hospital after he was shot when he lunged at Watsonville police officers with a kitchen knife this morning. That after the man's family told officers he was on drugs and aggressive and might be hallucinating. The suspect, who also threw rocks at cars on Ohlone Parkway, was reportedly shot once in the torso. While the shooting was investigated, several portions of Main Street were closed. The roadway reopened to traffic this afternoon. A 29-year-old Soledad man has been arrested in connection with the alleged sexual abuse of a child. Reportedly, his now 14-year-old victim told law enforcement officers that her relative abused her for 7 years. The Soledad man was booked into Monterey County Jail, and his bail has been set at $16 million. Larkin Valley Road reopened early this morning after authorities closed it when a vehicle ran into a power pole around 4 p.m. yesterday. The male driver is believed to have been under the influence at the time of the crash that occurred between Highway 1 and White Road. And although full containment is still expected at some point today for the Ferguson fire burning near Yosemite National Park, interior parts of the forest may continue to smolder and burn for some time, causing lingering smoke in the area. Yosemite Valley reopened to visitors yesterday, as did the Wawona and Mariposa Groves. However, Glacier Point is still closed to the public. For more information, people are encouraged to go online to nps.gov/YOSE or call the national park. The time now 34 minutes after 6 p.m. More local news for you coming up at the top of the 6 o'clock hour tomorrow morning, hopefully. For KSCO, I'm Susan Simon.
Get ready for a real good time. The Scotts Valley Chamber of Commerce presents the 19th annual Scotts Valley Art, Wine, and Beer Festival, August 18th and 19th at Sky Park. Hello, folks. I'm Jeanette Larkin with the Scotts Valley Chamber of Commerce with an invitation for you to join us for the fun. Explore the many fine artists as well as award-winning wineries and microbreweries. We'll also have mimosas, margaritas, live music, and entertainment, plus a kids' fun zone. Join us Saturday for the Cops and Rodders Car Show, where over 100 vintage automobiles will be on display. And Sunday is Bring Your Dog Day, with activities and contests for all canines. All of this and admission is free at the Scotts Valley Art, Wine, and Beer Festival. See you there. This year, I am not saying Olay.
Kubota comfort will surprise you. Kubota versatility and performance is amazing. See everything Kubota has to offer, including the new BX80 Subcompact Series at C&N Tractors in Watsonville. Performance, versatility, comfort, and exceptional financing available on approved credit. C&N Tractors makes it so easy to get a Kubota. Get details at cndntractors.com or at C&N Tractors in Watsonville. Give us your tough jobs.
Every Saturday from 12 noon to 1 o'clock on KSCO, it's Perspectives with Dr. David Biles. Perspectives covers a number of topics, including holistic health, vaccinations, and government waste. Don't miss the next exciting Perspectives program here on AM 1080 KSCO. Every Saturday from 12 noon to 1, right here.
If someone should ask, tell them you heard it on AM 1080 KSCO.
You're listening to AM 1080 KSCO Santa Cruz. If you want to get on board, you have about 20 minutes to do so. Dennis Adler is hanging out with us. We have a few calls lined up, some text messages, as well as maybe some emails. We'll check those. If you want to get on board, you should do it now. 6:37 is the time. All right, Dennis, you want to finish up anything before we get to the next phone call?
No, we can go on.
Okay. Let's head out to, let's see what's up next. I have to grab the clicker here. Let's head out to Salinas. Timmy, thank you for your call. You're in the air.
Yes, Mr. Michaels, sir, I'd like to ask your distinguished guest a question. And it's kind of calm it down a little bit. Like, first, and I want to get my answer off the air.
Sure.
One, the first question is, what is his most favorite, I mean the one that just makes him just think about his most favorite Chinese dish? And then I would like to ask him, if he's into like space movies and stuff, and has he ever seen one of the most advanced space movies ever made before, starring the former star Gina Davis? And the title of the movie is called Earth Girls Are Easy. And I'd like to know if he's ever seen it. Thank you, sir.
Okay, well, I really love mapo tofu, which is, tofu is the Chinese pronunciation of tofu. And you can get mapo tofu at any Chinese restaurant. It's that soft, tofu with, hot, spicy chili sauce, and I really love it. I don't know if you've ever had it.
I was going to write it down, but as soon as you said tofu, forget it. I'm not a tofu fan.
Tofu, isn't it great? I love it.
How would you say, Dennis, the dishes that you see in your average Chinese restaurant, is that authentic? Yes, no?
Well, it's kind of Siam food, If you're in China, you're not eating that.
Siam. Is that an actual term, or did you just make that up?
I kind of made it up.
That's kind of nice. I like that.
Yeah. But, the food is much too sweet and, greasy here. You have greasy spoons there, of course. But the really good Chinese food in China is so far beyond what anything you get here. Mm-hmm. You might get some of that in Chinatown, but if you go to a Chinese restaurant, there's two menus. There's the menu they give to us, guelos, as we're called, and then there's the menu that's given to the Chinese guests. And it's totally different menu. One's in English, one's, in Chinese.
And the
Chinese
one that's in
only.
Chinese, they better know what they're doing, right?
Yeah, because the Chinese people, they know what to expect and what they want, But it's a totally different menu.
479-1080-218-5726. Let's head out to Monterey. Jimmy, thank you for your call. You are in the air.
Hi, Dave. How you doing?
Good, Jimmy. What's up?
Dennis, I loved your history lesson. I thought it was fantastic. But let me finish what I have to say about China, because I have experience in China, starting in the 70s, in business. I've had business in China. I've negotiated with the Chinese people. They require you to allow the Chinese company to own at least 51% of anything that you go into there.
Yeah, I know. That's true.
And they just hold on. Now.
Yeah, sure.
You had a chance to talk. I'm talking.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
And they will eventually copy your product. The Chinese government will come in and require you to charge things that aren't legitimate. And if you don't do it, then they will accuse you of tax fraud and they will seize your company. I have seen it happen more than once. And let's go to the debt. You said the Chinese bought trillions of dollars of the U.S. debt. They did, starting way before 2009, buying treasuries in the U.S. But the biggest purchase was before the recession. The recession was recovered by our Fed buying $3.5 trillion worth of treasuries, mortgages, and debt in the U.S. They're the ones that saved the U.S. economy, not China. But China right now is deeply in debt. They have, about a month ago, they declared that all companies who have debt outside the U.S. must sell everything in the U.S. and return the funds to China to pay off the China banks by August the 15th.
All right, let's let our guest respond here. Jimmy, thank you for your call.
Okay, well, there's a lot of truth to what Jimmy is.
Jimmy.
Yeah. I'm not going to dispute some of that, but let me tell you one thing. The China market is immense, and for an American company to go to China and set up shop independently without input from a Chinese partner would be virtually impossible. I mean, people don't understand. The type of economy in China is totally different than here. It is a mixed economy now in the sense that there is a lot of private enterprise, but the major portions of the economy, not in terms of the percentage of GDP, but the commanding heights of the Chinese economy are state-owned. It's a socialist country, no matter what people say.
Right.
With a very strong entrepreneurial component. Of course, it's all bound up with the Chinese system of governance. Americans going over there or people from any other country going to China, they're not going to replicate what they do here over there. It's a totally different system. So, you really need to have a business partner, and that's not so unusual. Many other countries have similar types of regulations in that regard. And it's changing. There are more and more companies as China's developed and continues to open up. They're allowing companies now to be wholly owned in China. Like Tesla has been negotiating to open a factory in China that would be fully owned and not in partnership with a Chinese company. So things are evolving, things are changing, and I would expect left to the natural development, course of development, that's going to transition to the point where there'll be companies that have a majority stake or that are wholly owned. That's changing.
Thank you for your call, Jimmy.
Oh, yeah.
So things are maybe not perfectly balanced, but the pressure of the market is getting things to.
Oh, yeah. And you got to remember,
equalize.
When China started off, it was a very poor country.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in China back in the 80s, 80% of the people lived in the countryside. Only 20% lived in the cities, and people were making next to nothing. Back in 1980, the per capita GDP was like $500. Now it's like upwards of $8,000.
We're going to get to Jim's call. The President Xi has just kind of solidified power, right? And for the most part, my understanding is kind of set up himself up as a dictator. That's what we hear, right? A dictatorship with him being in control of this. What is your take on that?
Okay. Well, first off, the Chinese system of governance is totally different from here. It's a one-party system. But within that party are all different sorts of ideas. And Xi Jinping, got into power, and his major objective was to clean it up. Over the last 10, 15 years, longer than that, because of the opening up of the economy and more free enterprise and, the state-owned industries, there was a lot of corruption. Lots of money being made under the table. And he went in and started cleaning it up. And in so doing, he eliminated a lot of rivals who were engaged in that sort of activity. It's been a resounding success as far as the Chinese people are concerned.
Yeah, you could just look at it, right?
Yeah. And besides that, he saw that, China was sort of adrift. It didn't have any real, purpose in mind. Basically, it was all about making money. And, Xi Jinping, he grew up during the Cultural Revolution. He was actually sent down to the countryside, because his father was, a high-ranking politician who was purged. Now, unlike the Soviet Union, where when they purged you, they shot you in the head, in China, they sent you down to the countryside. My father-in-law, this eminent botanist, was sent down to the countryside during the Cultural Revolution for 10 years, but afterwards, when it was realized what a fiasco that was, he was reinstated and given all sorts of accolades. And, Deng Xiaoping was sent down twice and then recalled. They didn't eliminate the rivals in China as they did in the Soviet Union. And this, exiling high officials has a long history in China, going back to imperial times. They were brought back, and then they took over the country politically. The economy was reformed, but things kind of got out of hand, and she's been trying to redirect the country back onto a more stable course. And one thing, this idea about president for life. No, was FDR president for life? There were no term limits then, and he got elected 4 times. Because he had.
So all they did was basically get rid of term limits? Okay.
And so it's not president for life.
Okay. I could see easily how that could be misconstrued and manipulated to say, dictator. I could see that easily. 479-1080, Jim calling from Seaside. You're in the air.
Hey, thank you. I've got a few questions. I want to rattle them off and then get responses. Ni hao ma.
Ni hao.
Anyway, I've been throughout most of the Southeast Asian cities, and one thing I noticed is if there is a popular record or movie, any town one day afterwards will have copies made in China. Bootleg, you can buy for $1, $2, negotiable. So, China doesn't recognize patent at all. Number 2, in 1979, China invaded North Vietnam. They got their butt kicked, but in retaliation, China made dams on all the rivers supplying Southeast Asia. Salween into Thailand, Mekong into Vietnam. They threatened to cut off the water supply, so Vietnam gave China the largest naval base in the world, Cam Ranh Bay, which they used to dominate the South Pacific. Okay.
Well, okay. Can I respond?
Yeah, please.
Okay. China does not have a base at Cam Ranh Bay. It's just not true. It's just not true. I mean,
told that by a Vietnamese friend of mine just last week.
Look, the Vietnamese are not going to give Cam Ranh Bay to China. It's just whoever told you that just doesn't know what they're talking about. I don't care if he's Vietnamese, Chinese, or whatever. You can research that for yourself. China does not have a base at Cam Ranh Bay. They don't dock ships there. They don't have any Navy, ships there. That's just not true. As regards the war with Vietnam, that occurred, obviously, in 1979 when that was a very volatile time, in the relationship between China and Vietnam. It had to do with what was going on in Cambodia. The Vietnamese invaded Cambodia, which was a traditional ally of China. Yeah, that happened. That's one of the few instances, and it was a border war. China didn't march into Vietnam. They fought a border war, and there's no denying that. But China has not invaded any other countries, along its borders. It's not an aggressive power. As regards the damming of rivers, the Mekong and other rivers, I think that's a gross exaggeration. That's really, they have placed dams on rivers within their territory to generate hydroelectric power, and obviously that has an impact downstream. But I don't think, you can characterize it the way you did.
Well, they did dam the Mekong River, the principal source.
Well, that is in China. The Mekong has an origin in China. They have a perfect right.
They dammed it in China so it wouldn't go south.
Well, the river still flows south. The Mekong still flows south. You're trying to tell me the Mekong is dried up? No. The Mekong's a major artery throughout Laos and throughout Vietnam, and it's not as you portray it. It's not as if the Chinese are controlling the water supply of Laos and Vietnam. It's just not happening that way.
Jim, thank you for your call. That was Jim calling from Seaside. 479-1080, 218-5726. We only have about 5 more minutes for phone calls, so let's get to some of these text messages. Okay, let's see. 218-5726. Dennis, here we go. So the bad news for China is they are now too expensive. Myanmar is now the cheap labor market. True? Not true?
Well, yeah. A lot of Chinese companies, these are, private companies, are setting up shop in Southeast Asia because it's cheaper labor. Oh, yeah, that's by design.
218-5726. This gentleman fails to mention that China's fierce determination to race forward comes at a cost. They are destroying many of the oldest ties to their culture in Beijing and other cities. As your guest read, The Last Days of Beijing, it describes the ruthless destruction of people's ways of life.
That's just ridiculous. China is a country that's modernizing just like any other country. Just look at this country. We're constantly renovating, destroying old neighborhoods, gentrifying this and that. Actually, China spends literally hundreds of billions of dollars renovating temples and cultural artifacts. They're very committed to the restoration of neighborhoods. Hutongs in China are being refurbished. Some of them have been demolished for developmental purposes, as happens everywhere in the world. There have been periods when maybe that went to overboard, and then they retreat and they realize, well, we don't want to do it that way any longer. It's just like any nation in the world. You can't depict China as being in any way, more at fault for developing, the country than any other country in the world.
218-5726. Trump has often said China is smarter than us. 218-5726. Anyone who wants to criticize China should visit China. 218-KSEO. Sounds like the Chinese apologist salesmen should move to the most polluted place on earth.
Okay, well, I'm not a salesman. I'm a friend of China. I've been involved with China my whole adult life. I visited and lived in China. What can I say? It's Indonesia, far more polluted than China. Actually, China's cleaning up its act. The skies are clear in Beijing. You can go online and clearly see that, they've shut down coal, power plants. They've relocated factories. And when they relocate factories, they build factories up to modern day standards. They have a vast campaign, to reverse the environmental impacts that occurred during their rapid industrialization, as has occurred in every other country that's undergone industrialization, just as in this country, back in the 60s and 70s when the pollution was horrendous, when rivers were on fire. You might recall that, I do. China went through the same sort of experience. Now they're cleaning up their act because they realize that it's unsustainable not to do so.
You know, I had a friend who likes to go to China as well, and that's something that would always bug him too. And he would say, you know, their attitude is basically, you know, you Americans, you went through your industrial revolution and it just polluted the hell out of everything. At that time, though, there was nobody to say, hey, you can't do this. This is bad for the ozone. Nobody knew any of that stuff, right? So get off our case. You know, you did your thing, and we're progressing. We're going through that now. Get off our case.
Yeah. Well, look, how much of the forest cover in California was destroyed? 99% of the forest cover of California was, you know, clear cut. So who are we to talk about environmental destruction?
218-5726. Dave, one of your best shows ever. The guest has facts, not biased. Thank you. 218-5726. Last caller doesn't know how dams work? Question mark. I don't know. Let's see who's calling here. Caller, can I get your name and where you're calling from?
Yeah, I'm calling. My name is Candy, and I'm calling from Highway 1 at Morrissey.
Okay.
And I've just been passed on the southbound direction. I'm going northbound. On southbound, there's just been, probably at least 5 police cars and an incident control command van, all driving down the highway with lights and sirens. And I was listening to your station, and I just thought it would be great to find out what was going on.
Okay, well, we'll get on that right now. I'll pass it on to the newsroom. Thank you for the phone call. Police activity. China, do they have strict gun laws?
Yeah, like most countries in the world. You know, you go to England or, you know, Europe, or, you know, they have similar types of gun laws. Now, I've been out into what would be the boonies in China, you know, the real rural, out-of-the-way provinces like Qinghai. And there, you know, if you hunt, as many people do in those frontier regions, excuse me, you can have a firearm. Of course, it's registered and it's for a specific purpose.
So do they have the equivalent of Okies up in the hills? I mean, do they have the equivalent of mountain folk?
Well, that
kind of stuff.
Well, let's put it this way: there are 55 or 56 national minorities in China. These are people that are not the Han Chinese. You know, they have their own history, their own language, their own customs. You know, and they generally live in, you know, the most inaccessible regions of the country. Historically, they were pushed into those regions as the Han population expanded throughout Chinese history. So you have, you know, Hmong. In China, they're called Miao, and that's a major minority group in southern China. And they generally, and actually a lot of the southern Chinese are basically Hmong, but they've been Sinified, totally assimilated. Now they consider themselves Han, but physically and biologically, they're Hmong, Miao. But, you know, the Miao who kept their traditions and language live in the mountain regions and you know, still retain their
Is it romantic?
customs.
Does it have that romantic feel?
Yeah, well, you know, they have very ornate costumes and headdresses. And, you know, the majority people, Han people, they think it's very romantic because, you know, these are people who have very unique life ways and customs and dances and songs. And, you know, that's very popular tourist areas now.
You know what? We have to have you back on and we'll talk about some of that stuff too, some of the culture in China.
Oh, sure.
This has been fantastic. Now, this has been great. An hour and a half went by like that. That's been great.
Well, I'd love to come back.
Dennis Etler, we will have you back. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you to everybody who called in, texted, and emailed. We appreciate that. Flight 1080 KSCO Santa Cruz is landing. We will be back tomorrow.